My husband caught me cheating, exposed my affair, and forced me to face the cycle of infidelity. Why am I driving to my mother's house at 11 at night in the pouring rain? Why are my husband and children safe and dry at home, probably already asleep in their beds? Why did Bradley threaten to divorce me? I haven't even done anything. What the heck is going on? Why won't anybody talk to me? My name is Emma Smith, except professionally I go by my maiden name Johnson. My husband, Brad, never had a problem with that. He understood how important it was to me that I earned my degrees and certifications in clinical psychology under my own name before we got married. He was always supportive, and that's why we didn't have the ceremony until I was 26. That day, just over 9 years ago, was probably the happiest day of my life. We had the perfect wedding, not too big, not too small, and all of our families were there. My father, Jim, is an amazing dancer. He'd been taking lessons for something like 15 years. That's how he met his wife, Grace. Technically, she's my stepmom, but I was already 17 when they first met, so she didn't have a hand in raising me. My mother, Linda, was also there with her fourth husband, Glenn. Having them all together at the wedding was a major feat of diplomacy, but it went smoothly. I even saw Mom sitting at a table with Dad and Grace while I was dancing with Bradley after the father-daughter dance. We wanted to start our family right away since we'd waited to get married. Brillin is 8 and Caden is 6. A girl and a boy, 2 years apart, just like me and my younger brother Tommy. I know it's silly, but it makes me feel like I accomplished everything correctly. They're at home now, and I'm not. I should go back. I don't know why I should have to do this. I belong in my house with my family, and Bradley needs to just get over his hurt feelings and accept what's going to happen. I need to go back home. I need to make things right with him. But I can't. I'm not welcome. I should explain. I arrived home early as I'd planned. I had the groceries I needed for Bradley's favorite dinner, my mom's meatloaf recipe, believe it or not, and a nice bottle of red wine. Idaho potatoes, sour cream, chives, Wisconsin cheddar cheese, and Brussels sprouts. I know lots of people don't like them, but I roast them with olive oil and a little salt and pepper, and they're just perfect. Key lime pie for dessert. Oh, and a few delicate little things I'd picked up at Victoria's Secret that Tuesday. So we'd spend the weekend making things special before I left for my conference, the one he didn't know about yet. The one I was planning on telling him about after dinner. It took me almost an hour to get everything ready. While the meatloaf was in the oven, I cleaned off the table and vacuumed the dining room, put out the good place settings, and had time to shower, do my hair and makeup, and slip into my new blue dress. The color really brings out my eyes. I dressed it up with a necklace Bradley had given me for our 5th anniversary. The kids liked my meatloaf okay, but I had to make mac and cheese for them since they wouldn't eat the potatoes or the sprouts. The instant he got home after picking up the kids, the show began. Brillin and Caden tore around like the whirlwinds they are, and we barely managed to change their shoes and put away their things before dinner. I served their food, got them seated, and was pouring the wine when Bradley joined us, his eyebrow raised in question. I just smiled, beaming the most loving, adoring smile I could muster. It only seemed to make him more concerned. Everyone was happy and pleased. They all praised my cooking. The kids devoured their meal and even had a small slice of key lime pie each. Caden didn't like his, saying it tasted sour. Brillin finished it for him. After we settled them in front of their favorite movie, one they'd seen countless times, Bradley nudged me back into the dining room, where he had already tidied up and loaded the dishwasher. He poured the last of the red wine for me and a finger of Glenmorangie for himself. Neat. Before taking his seat, he inquired if I would disclose the reason behind the evening's special arrangements, questioning if I couldn't surprise him without a particular occasion. I expressed my enjoyment of the evening and acknowledged the effort put into the dinner, but he highlighted that it wasn't a birthday, anniversary, or any special day. It was simply a Friday night, prompting him to inquire further. I admitted to playfully deceiving him, hinting that I might need his help next week. He asked about the nature of the favor, and I explained that I would be attending a conference in Chicago for 4 days, from Tuesday to Friday, requiring him to take on the role of a single dad temporarily. His demeanor shifted slightly as he acknowledged the responsibility he would have to shoulder in my absence. Anticipating our time apart, I teased him with promises of a passionate weekend together before my departure. I leaned forward, adding a suggestive glance to my words, hinting at the excitement to come upon my return. He nodded skeptically, questioning why he was just hearing about the conference at that moment. I explained that the invitation had recently come up, highlighting that I had only been invited and hadn't discussed it earlier. Despite my attempts to reassure him, he expressed his disappointment at being informed late and his concern about the situation. My attempts to calm him down seemed to have the opposite effect. He suddenly stood up, gesturing for me to remain seated, and muttered his frustration. Clearly upset, he tried to control his emotions, acknowledging his desire to avoid arguing in front of the children. He instructed me to put the kids to bed, and indicated that he needed time to gather his thoughts before continuing the discussion. With a tense grip on the chair, he shook his head and went upstairs, leaving me to reflect on how the conversation had not gone as planned. He spent the next 20 minutes pacing around the house like an agitated tiger, glancing at his phone. He'd angrily read something, mutter curses under his breath, and resume pacing. At one point, he made a call and left a voicemail saying, "It's Bradley. She's acting like Linda right now. It's happening now. Please call me the instant you get this." What on earth did acting like Linda mean? What did my mom have to do with this? Not long after, his phone rang, and he stepped outside to take the call, shooting me a glare. Clearly, he didn't want me or the kids to overhear. He returned inside but was called out again after a brief moment. The kids seemed puzzled but unfazed by his behavior. As the movie neared its end, he disappeared into the kitchen where I heard his coffee grinder buzzing. Surprisingly, Brillin and Caden didn't resist their bedtime routine much, brushing their teeth and getting into pajamas without fuss. Somehow they sensed that something was amiss. I too felt jittery throughout. What was troubling him? What did he know? Who was he talking to? And why bring up Mom? With the kids tucked in, I descended to find Bradley back at the table with a full pot of coffee, 2 mugs, and a large Yeti cup. He instructed me to sit, and I obeyed. He poured the coffee, but I declined, mentioning that it would keep me awake. He insisted, saying I would need it. I pressed him to tell me what was bothering him, and he responded by saying he would if I would, assuring me that nothing was wrong. He explained that I was worrying unnecessarily, emphasizing that it was just a conference, a one-time event that I needed to do for myself. I questioned his motives, and he reaffirmed his stance, saying it was exactly as he had stated. He expressed dissatisfaction with the taste of the coffee, prompting me to question what was wrong. Despite my reassurance that the coffee was fine, he began a conversation by asking if I considered him stupid. After affirming that I didn't, he questioned whether I believed myself to be smarter due to my graduate degree in psychology. I denied this and affirmed my respect for him as my husband, partner, and human being. He emphasized the importance of honesty in our conversation and warned against half-truths or sugarcoating. He insisted that he knew more about the situation than I thought and cautioned against lying or manipulation, emphasizing that it wouldn't end well if I attempted to deceive him. I assured him that I would never deceive him, but suggested that he might be deceiving himself. He questioned when I was invited to the conference and how long I had known about it. I explained that I had only mentioned it that evening, claiming it had just happened. He pressed further, asking if I had known before Tuesday and implying that I had planned the evening to soften him up for the news. I defended myself, insisting it wasn't like that. But his silence spoke volumes. I suggested that we go through the questions again. He asked who had invited me to the conference, to which I replied it was a colleague. He continued to inquire about who was covering the expenses for my attendance, pressing for a direct answer. I mentioned that I would reimburse them, but he insisted on a clearer response regarding who had arranged the fees, airfare, and accommodation. He expressed concern over our account statements for the past 3 months, suggesting that either I had planned this earlier or had undisclosed accounts. Despite his evident upset, I reassured him that he had nothing to worry about. He asked if Richard Taylor was attending the conference. I started feeling a surge of dread. A voice in my head mocked me for being foolish, but I pushed back, telling it to shut up and insisting that Bradley didn't know anything for certain. I admitted that Richard might be there as he was presenting on Wednesday. Bradley showed me the conference agenda on his phone, expressing surprise that I didn't know about it. Given my close friendship and professional relationship with Richard, I confessed that I did know but had forgotten. Bradley urged me to stop making up stories and reminded me that he wasn't foolish, leaving me with nothing more to say. Bradley suggested recapping the situation. He asserted that weeks or months ago, my older colleague, who he implied had romantic intentions toward me, invited me on a fully funded romantic trip to the city, which I accepted. He accused me of springing this news on him last minute, distracting him with closeness, food, and romance, and leaving him with the responsibility of the kids to prevent his interference. I protested, denying his accusations. He reminded me of his earlier request not to lie to him or to myself, to which I insisted that I wasn't lying. Bradley interrogated me about the duration of my involvement with Richard. I denied any involvement, but he pressed further, asking about Richard's involvement with me and whether I had been involved with anyone else. He threw in a random question about the capital of California to check my presence of mind. My thoughts raced as I reassured myself that Richard couldn't possibly know anything, as we hadn't been. Duh. Lovemaking. I believed Bradley had to trust me, being my husband. Bradley persisted, accusing me of being clouded by an affair fog and observing my guilty expression. I denied having an affair, but he suggested that perhaps I wasn't involved with Richard yet, noticing my expression change. I explained that Richard had invited me to the conference 6 weeks prior and assured Bradley that we would have separate accommodations and that I would reimburse Richard for expenses. I emphasized the conference's significance for my career and pleaded with Bradley to trust me, reaffirming my love and loyalty to him. Bradley took a slow sip of his black coffee, emphasizing his preference for unadulterated quality. He accused me of diluting that quality by planning everything behind his back, betraying him with secrets, lies, and deception. He asserted that my actions constituted betrayal, though the extent of it remained uncertain. I took a deep breath, trying to reassure myself that I hadn't done anything wrong yet. Bradley accused me of leaving myself vulnerable and setting myself up for closeness with Richard Taylor, suggesting that my actions indicated anticipation rather than explicit planning. I acknowledged that he wasn't entirely wrong in his assessment. My guilt resurfaced, leaving me speechless. Bradley questioned the purpose of the lingerie I had purchased, pointing out that he had seen the charges on the account. I explained that it was intended for him, for our weekend together, and for when I returned from the trip, though there wasn't much packed for the trip itself. He questioned whether any of the items were specifically for Richard, to which I hesitated before admitting that some might have been. Despite my assurances, Bradley expressed his lack of trust in me and his concerns about the situation. He asserted that my actions gave him plenty of reasons to worry, and he set down his mug, signaling the seriousness of the conversation. He laid out the terms, instructing me to leave the house immediately and go to my mother's place. He emphasized that I was not welcome and needed to have a serious conversation about married women's conduct. I was to stay overnight with Tom and Bernice, as he had already informed them, and they were expecting me. I protested, calling it absurd and claiming he couldn't do that. He countered by stating that what was truly absurd was going on a honeymoon with someone else and expecting him to accept it. He reminded me that we had dealt with similar situations before and warned me that if I didn't learn from this, the marriage would be over. He expressed his seriousness, stating that he was dead serious about his decision. I argued that he couldn't force me, as he was my husband, not my boss. He acknowledged that he couldn't control me, but emphasized that if he didn't approve of my actions, he could file for divorce, asserting that it was a matter of partnership within the marriage. Despite my disbelief and protestations, he insisted on ending the marriage, stating that we would sort out the details later and that he would hire a lawyer the next day to serve me with divorce papers. In an attempt to prevent further action, he instructed me to visit my mother and suggested that if I wanted him to refrain from taking legal action, I should comply with his instructions. He reassured me that my mother was expecting me and had been informed about the situation. My phone rang and he urged me to answer. It was my mom who warned me about the seriousness of the situation and advised me to comply with Bradley's instructions to avoid regret. She mentioned baking cookies and hung up, leaving me in shock. My phone buzzed again, and it was my brother Tommy who must have sent another message. He expressed concern about my situation, offering the spare room set up as a nursery for me and assuring me that I could stay as long as needed. Tommy emphasized that I should call when on my way, even if it meant waking them up during feedings. I declined Tommy's offer, but he insisted I come over by the next morning, threatening to sever our relationship if I didn't comply. He made it clear that taking sides against Bradley wasn't an option, asserting Bradley's correctness about the family curse. Tommy concluded the conversation by announcing plans to take everyone to IHOP the next day. Left alone, I questioned Bradley about what he had told Tommy and our family. Bradley stood up and explained that he had shared the truth with them, finding their insights helpful. He encouraged me to finish my coffee, pack a bag, and mentioned making a caramel latte for the road. Bradley assured me he would handle the kids, update his family, and postpone informing Chuck and Bethany to avoid an immediate revelation to my father, who would be devastated. Confused and alarmed, I pressed Bradley for details, particularly about Tommy's mention of a family curse. Bradley redirected me to discuss it with Linda, my soon-to-be ex-wife, leaving me puzzled about the unfolding situation. After downing the coffee with extra skim milk and 2 Splendas on my way out, a 16 ounces Yeti cup of double-shot non-fat caramel latte, a stop for gas, and 2 more for bathroom breaks. I pulled into Mom's driveway at 10 minutes past midnight. The garage door opened, and I parked in the empty bay. Where was Doug's car? Mom greeted me and expressed happiness at my arrival. She mentioned the importance of me coming and shook her head, suggesting it wouldn't have been good otherwise. Inviting me inside, she informed me about cookies in the kitchen and offered tea. At 60, Mom still looked elegant. She maintained her figure gracefully, though it was showing its age. Her posture was impeccable, despite having 2 children. She seemed untouched by osteoporosis. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, but still lustrous and stylishly arranged, and her eyes were as blue as ever like mine. I hoped to look half as good at her age. She began pouring tea without any request from me. I mentioned my preference for no caffeine, explaining that Bradley had made me drink both coffee and a double shot, leaving me jittery. She assured me that the tea she was serving was chamomile and reassured me that I would be fine. Giving me a once-over, she mentioned that I had worn the same dress when talking to Bradley earlier that night. I explained that Bradley didn't allow me to change before kicking me out. I had to grab some stuff and leave. Tommy seemed distressed, repeating, "Oh my," and when I questioned what was wrong with the dress, they mentioned its significance and Tommy's reference to a curse. Confused and desperate for information, I asked about Tommy's comment and the ongoing situation. In response, she handed me homemade ginger snaps and suggested we move to the sitting room for an explanation. There I noticed the TV showing a paused football game, surprising me because my mom typically avoided football. I inquired about Doug's whereabouts, and she revealed that Doug usually stayed with his friend Brian, with whom he had been in a relationship for almost 20 years. The revelation about Doug's handsomeness left me puzzled about why my mom was married to him. She detailed a complicated story about their marriage with Doug, emphasizing the societal pressures that led them to be married. They acknowledged the acceptance of gay couples marrying nowadays, but explained that, at their age, there were various complexities and layers to their situation. Doug, despite admitting he was gay, did not fully accept himself as such, and did not see himself living openly as a gay man. Instead, he considered his relationship with Brian unique. She clarified that Doug didn't feel shame about being gay, it just wasn't how he identified himself. They referred to their situation as being a beard, an old-fashioned term where gay men and lesbians would marry to meet societal expectations but maintain private lives outside the marriage. When asked about their own involvement, she denied being gay but admitted to being a terrible wife. They confessed to ruining their previous marriages due to various negative traits, especially hurting their father deeply. Tears welled up as they expressed their enduring love for their father and admitted noticing the love between me and Bradley, urging me not to become like them. Overwhelmed with emotion, she broke down crying. In response to my confusion, they briefly rose from their seat, gesturing for me to stay put, mentioning they needed to fetch something to show me. While she was away, I heard her rummaging in one of the spare bedrooms. Glancing at the screen, I noticed it wasn't displaying the game but was paused on 2 middle-aged male commentators. They might have been football players in their prime before age caught up with them. Mom returned with a blue dress and a clear plastic dry cleaning cover. She noted that the dress they were showing me wasn't exactly the same as the one they wore, but while the style differed, the skirt's length and color were nearly identical. She shared that she had worn this dress the night she ended her marriage to my father almost 30 years ago. The reason for keeping the dress remained unclear to her, whether as a reminder of mistakes, a connection to their time with Jim, or because it made them feel beautiful. They recounted wearing the dress once more on their birthday that year, but it only made things worse. The incident happened in February, during a snow-in period with little sunlight. They had bought the dress for Valentine's Day, but the plans were canceled, and they ended up spending it with me and someone else. Jim never saw the dress, and to add to the unfortunate circumstances, it was a leap year, extending the duration of the dreaded month. At the time, I was part of a group of women and their husbands. I barely remember their names now. As couples, we were all pleasant, but when it was just us women, well, you wouldn't believe the scheming and gossip. We'd talk about what we'd do if the right man came along. One woman regularly cheated on her husband and boasted about it. Another was planning an affair with a CO worker, and we all supported her. Fortunately, her husband caught on before it went too far. I never engaged in any of that, until one day I did. There was a local sports star who frequented bars and clubs, targeting married women and humiliating their husbands. He seemed to enjoy the power he had over them. He'd take these women to his hotel and give them an unforgettable experience, aiming to ruin them for other men. He was charming, wealthy, and famous, so he got away with it repeatedly. His activities were something of an open secret among women seeking excitement. I don't know how many marriages he destroyed, but it was more than a few. It was like a game to him. One of those venues was a dinner dance hall affiliated with the hotel. Our group of cheaters and aspirants decided to bring our husbands there on February 29th, Leap Night, to reconnect with each other and our spouses. You and Tommy were staying overnight with the Porters, and we all had hotel rooms. What our husbands didn't realize was that attending with them was akin to buying raffle tickets. Mark Levier would select one fortunate lady for the evening, making her his chosen companion. That's why the night out excited us girls so much. My attention turned to the screen, where Mark Levallier, the commentator on the left, appeared. His name was displayed in a graphic beneath his chest, confirming his identity as the revelation unfolded. It became apparent that Mark Levier was Mommy's awful boyfriend. The disclosure shattered my reality, leaving me feeling instantly dizzy and unwell. When questioned about it, I couldn't recall much, only vague memories of staying with Nana and Grandpa while Dad was gone for a while when I was 6 years old. The details were hazy, but I vaguely remembered being upset during that time. My parents had tried to shield me from the situation, acknowledging that I might not recall any of it. During that period, Dad had disappeared for weeks, and counseling was sought as a way to address the issues in their marriage. Mom admitted to attempting to manipulate or control Dad, as he had accused her of doing. The counseling turned into a disaster, and Dad left for Atlanta in a fit of anger for 10 days. Mom didn't know where he had gone until later, when he started taking temporary work assignments out of town. The mistreatment from Mom led to Dad's anger and departure from their marriage. Mom further revealed an incident with Mark, approaching their table and taking her for a dance without permission. They danced for several songs, and Mark instructed Mom to slip out the back with him. When returning to the table for her purse, Mom faced Jim, who had witnessed the entire encounter. Jim covered for her, distracting Dad and allowing Mom to leave. This marked the end of her marriage to Dad. The separation and divorce took another 1.5 years, marking the real conclusion of Mom's marriage. Reflecting on that time, Mom expressed sorrow, acknowledging that the experience was beyond dreadful. However, she asserted that the worst part wasn't the separation itself, but rather the reasons behind it. Mom confessed that she would have sabotaged her marriage eventually, even if Mark the scoundrel hadn't chosen her that night. She highlighted her repeated destructive behavior with 3 different husbands, admitting her self-centered and entitled mindset, which she believed mirrored my current behavior. Mom emphasized that recognizing such behavior wasn't apparent at the time, and insisted that only a different perspective would reveal it. This conversation, she explained, was a kind of intervention, hoping that sharing her story would provide me with insight to change my ways before it's too late. She then shared her thoughts during her marriage with Jim, describing it as solid and deeply committed. Despite Jim being a wonderful and devoted husband, she succumbed to the temptation of a rare opportunity with Mark Levallier, who promised to transform her into a glamorous, liberated goddess for a single night of enchanting closeness. After that night, Mom expected to return to her loving husband, believing that Jim's love would eventually overcome any initial hurt. She detailed waking up in her mother's recliner, having fainted due to the overwhelming situation. Mom handed me water and cookies, explaining that I had been unconscious for about 30 minutes. She suggested I wouldn't sleep, given the circumstances, and encouraged me to stay and continue the conversation. I expressed my intention to go to bed, but Mom doubted I would sleep, given the resonance of her story with my thoughts. I reluctantly agreed that her story had indeed resonated with me. As I sat with the clear bag containing her blue dress next to me, Mom expressed concern about the possibility of me following in her footsteps. She questioned whether I was destined to ruin every marriage I entered, contemplating if I took my husband for granted while seeking solace in other men. Despite not having strayed yet, she acknowledged my intention to do so. She urged me to listen to my inner voice and expressed concern about the potential doom of my marriage if I continued down this path. When she inquired about my inner turmoil, she considered it a good sign that I was conflicted, but sighed in acknowledgement of the struggle. Mom acknowledged her own skill in silencing the voice of reason, admitting the difficulty of diagnosing and treating herself. As a psychologist, she understood the rationalizations I had made, convincing myself that entertaining another man was acceptable, emphasizing the exhilaration and validation it provided. She cautioned against the dangerous thinking that Bradley's forgiveness would pardon or accommodate such transgressions, likening it to a medication that could lead to self-destruction. She highlighted the broader impact on Bradley, Brillin, Caden, Tommy, herself, and even my father, expressing deep concern about 3 generations of Johnson women following the same pattern of self-destruction. The thought of devastating my father by witnessing this cycle weighed heavily on her. As Mom delved into family history, she clarified that Nana, being a Reed, did not have any known instance of infidelity. However, she pointed to Gamma Carroll, who cheated on James, Jim's father, while he was sick and dying, having a boyfriend named Ralph. Carroll eventually married him after James passed, but the marriage didn't last due to mutual unfaithfulness. Bob entered the picture later through a cancer family support group, and Jim initially distanced himself from his mother, holding her responsible for James's passing. Mom explained that I might not have known this family history because I and Dad were already divorced when they started visiting Gamma, Carol, and Bob in Colorado. Dad forgave Carol eventually, bridging the divide between them, and he even became friends with Bob, despite Bob not being at fault. Dad forgave his mother, but struggled to forgive Mom. However, he eventually forgave her at my wedding, after 20 years, even though she felt she didn't deserve it. She had been unrepentant, apologizing mainly for the cost it imposed on their relationship, and attributing his hurt feelings to his fault. She admitted to being proud of the affair, emphasizing that her pride was the whole point. Mom expressed her fear of being single, noting that she had never experienced it and wouldn't know how to exist alone. Contrasting this with Dad, who had the wisdom to give himself time before getting seriously involved with someone else. She admitted her lack of understanding about his approach. She acknowledged giving Mark her number the first night they met, leading to subsequent calls and messages. Despite not planning it, she found herself caught up in another one of Mark's pickup spots, contributing to the cycle of relationships without sufficient self-reflection. 2 weeks later, on St. Patrick's Day, at an Irish pub, Mom recounted her shameful behavior when her marriage with Dad was hanging in the balance. She continued to see Mark quietly, even while attempting to patch things up with Dad. Mom thought her interactions with Mark had nothing to do with her relationship with Jim, believing that what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Reflecting on her actions, she considered herself stupid and foolish. In an attempt to deceive Dad, Mom pretended to break up with Mark by staging a phone call, playing the recording for Dad. However, Mark persisted until he was certain the divorce was finalized, then moved on to another conquest, a married woman named Maureen. By that time, Mom had already arranged to marry Jeff. Mom emphasized the need to grasp the entire narrative, as it wasn't solely about Dad and Mark but extended further to her marriage with Jeff. Despite Jeff being a decent guy, Mom acknowledged he wasn't Jim. She married Jeff because he was available, and while she might have made it work with effort, she chose not to. Devoted to raising me and Tommy in the family home, Mom saw herself as only a part-time spouse. She had decided that if Jeff truly loved her, he would accept her choices, emphasizing that he had no other choice because he was a good guy. Mom believed that if he cared about being a good husband, he would comply with her decisions. For her, the external factors in her life weren't supposed to impact their relationship, and Jeff simply had to cope with it. Mom claimed it didn't imply she loved him any less and wasn't truly depriving him of anything. She urged her mom to understand and mentioned feeling dizzy and sick, but insisted she wasn't done. Following Jeff, Mom entered a relationship with Danny, seeking a more open-ended dynamic since she knew she would spend time away from the marriage. Danny was open to having other partners, essentially cheating on Mom, and she turned a blind eye to it, considering it her penance. Though she didn't precisely love him, Mom married Danny, and their arrangement persisted for a while. As time passed and her children grew older, Mom felt neglected and intentionally sought attention elsewhere. She reasoned that if an open marriage was acceptable for Danny, then it should be acceptable for her. Feeling she wasn't impacting Danny, Mom believed he would afford her the same leniency she had given him for the past 6 or 7 years. However, she misjudged the situation. As the end approached, Mom initiated things with Glenn. Mom insisted on sharing these details to make her daughter see the recurring pattern in her relationships, describing Glenn as the best of her husbands since Dad. Mom acknowledged that she took him for granted, assuming he would forgive her regardless of her actions. The most significant argument occurred after Emma's wedding, where Mom essentially ignored Glenn while focusing on reconciling with Dad for closure. Jim had to point out that Mom wasn't tending to her husband, treating Glenn with the same disregard she had shown to Dad, Jeff, and Danny. Mom openly wept as she shared this part of her story. I could only gaze at my mother, absorbing the emotional weight of the revelation. My arms trembled as I urgently struggled my way to the bathroom, barely reaching the toilet before emptying my stomach into the bowl. My mom stood by me, holding my hair as I retched. She tried to console me, sharing her own mistakes, regrets, and misguided choices. In her words, she unfolded tales of broken marriages, selfish decisions, and a repeating pattern of seeking temporary solace outside the commitment she had made. She spoke of her own weaknesses, acknowledging her selfish and thoughtless nature. As my mother revealed the narrative of her tangled relationships, I couldn't help but see echoes of my own life, shadows of the choices I was on the brink of making. She spoke of wearing a blue dress, seeking attention, and taking her husbands for granted. It was as if she was painting a cautionary tale, a mirror reflecting my current struggles and the potential consequences of my actions. My head was as churned up as my belly. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. She described a cycle of self-destruction, a path I seemed poised to follow. The realization was both unnerving and awakening. In her tearful confessions, my mother admitted marrying Doug to spare him from the pain she had inflicted on her previous husbands. I comforted her, trying to offer support amid the emotional storm. Yet as the stories unfolded, I couldn't escape the confrontation with my own reflection in her words. When she veered into my current situation, warning me of the consequences of my actions and the impact on Bradley, I felt a surge of nausea. The weight of truth, regret, and impending decisions overwhelmed me, and I staggered, collapsing onto the cold bathroom floor. The room spun, not just from the physical sickness, but from the emotional whirlwind that had gripped me. My mother's stories, a tapestry of missteps and heartbreaks, had wrapped around me, leaving me entangled in the consequences of her choices and the potential echoes in my own life. Struggling urgently to reach the bathroom, my arms trembled as I barely made it to the toilet, retching with Mom by my side, holding my hair. She encouraged me to let out all the bad stuff, emphasizing the realization of the consequences of burning down one's own life repeatedly. Mom expressed a strong desire for me not to follow the same path. In the midst of my emotional and physical distress, I questioned my own actions, berating myself for the poor choices I had made. I acknowledged the warnings, particularly from Bradley, and condemned myself for not heeding them. The harsh self-talk included doubts about deserving my husband's love and the happy home with Brillin and Caden. The fear of following in my mother's footsteps was evident, and I chastised myself for what I perceived as a destructive pattern in relationships. The tirade ended with a bleak prediction of ending up alone after several meaningless marriages in a similar kind of hell. After what felt like 9 years of that, Mom gave me some mouthwash and made me eat 2 more cookies. She said the ginger would settle my stomach. She brushed my hair and let me change my clothes. I didn't even have to go into the bag I'd packed. We're the same size. I could wear any of her clothes, so she gave me some comfy sweats and keds. She bundled me in her car and drove me 2 miles to Tommy and Bernice's house. She's all cried out. Mom informed my brother about my condition as she took care of me, expressing that I now understood the consequences of my actions. She instructed him to put me straight to bed, and she would join them for pancakes whenever I managed to get up and gather myself. Grateful, my brother thanked her and explained that Jonathan and the baby were currently asleep, a precious moment they took advantage of whenever possible. Mom kissed him, expressing love and mentioning seeing him at a more decent hour. Tom guided me inside and directed me to the nursery room, mentioning they weren't using it yet. Little Ella was peacefully asleep with her mother in the master bedroom, nestled in a crib-like extension beside their bed. Tom assured me that he wouldn't lecture me, acknowledging that our mom had probably done enough of that. He understood that I would spend the night processing everything, hoping I could get some sleep. Before concluding, he felt the need to share something about Bradley, clarifying that he hadn't spoken to him since I left. Despite acknowledging that I knew Bradley better, he wanted to emphasize something I might not have seen in him before. In a brother-to-brother-in-law manner, Tom revealed that Bradley was a fighter. He elaborated on Bradley's background as an Olympic fencer who worked as a combat consultant and choreographer for movies and theater productions, emphasizing Bradley's real understanding of a genuine bout, despite making things appear flashy and spectacular. As he referred to Bradley as a fighter, the weight of the words echoed through my thoughts. My brother painted a vivid picture of Bradley's commitment to me and our family, likening him to a warrior, a Navy SEAL, a force to be reckoned with. Despite Bradley's lack of combat experience, my brother emphasized the unwavering determination and protective instinct he held for us. It was a powerful message, a reassurance that Bradley would go to great lengths to keep us safe and united. The gravity of my brother's warning settled in, a stark reminder that attempting anything like my recent struggles would be futile. Bradley, armed with knowledge and a deep commitment, would not be deceived. My brother's intervention had shed light on Bradley's awareness, and I felt a mix of gratitude and relief. In a surprising revelation, my brother shared that our father had warned Bradley about potential challenges before we got married. It was a preemptive son-in-law talk, offering a unique perspective on marriage and human nature. The conversation highlighted the lengths my family had gone to preparing for the possibility of me straying down a destructive path. As my brother expressed his willingness to intervene and support me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of security. He kissed my forehead, offering a brotherly protection that brought comfort and reassurance. That night, I slept soundly, the weight of the revelations and the emotional turmoil of the past days beginning to lift. The next morning, the familiar chaos of family life greeted me, a mix of energetic children, misplaced shoes, and unbrushed teeth. It felt different in this new setting, but there was a hint of nostalgia for the earlier, more hectic days of parenting. As we gathered for breakfast, I couldn't help but admire my brother's family. Bernice, his wife, embodied grace and beauty, effortlessly balancing motherhood with her gymnast's physique and delicate Belgian accent. My brother's protective instincts extended to her, ensuring a haven of security for their family. The pancakes served that morning were not just a breakfast. They carried the flavor of emotional release and the optimism for better days. The conversation navigated away from past troubles, allowing us to share moments of joy and connection. Later, as Mom drove my car to meet us, the mention of a little something in the back caught my attention. She revealed it was her blue dress, a symbolic gesture of letting go. Despite its outdated style, she believed in its comeback, a hopeful reminder that even after facing the shadows of the past, there could be a resurgence of brighter days. I suppose we could classify it as vintage, Mom said with a slight half shrug. You're an adult, a beautiful one. You'll make your own decisions. Do what you want with it, just please try not to repeat my mistakes. Don't use it to break your husband's heart. And for heaven's sake, never let your father catch you wearing it. It would surely give him a heart attack. I won't, Mom. Thank you. Have a safe journey home. I love you. Love you too. Thank you. Thanks for everything. Before starting the car, I sent 2 messages. In the first message to Richard, I canceled my trip to Chicago, instructing him to cancel the plane tickets, the booked room, and the conference registration, seeking a refund for the fee. I suggested finding someone else for his plans, and expressed anger for threatening my marriage and family, almost ruining my life. I demanded no further communication, except in a professional context, which should be kept to a minimum. I warned him to avoid my husband and brother for his own safety, as they were aware of everything. In the second message to Bradley, I apologized for the situation and regretted causing worry. I acknowledged acting without considering him, and promised never to contemplate such actions again. I pledged never to take him for granted, to never underestimate him, and to always prioritize him. I thanked him for intervening and vowed to be the one to stop myself from now on, understanding the family history. I expressed deep love for him and recognized that he deserved better than the neglect, disrespect, and foolishness I had shown. I solemnly promised never to repeat such behavior. As I embarked on the journey home, a realization struck me about what to do with Mom's blue dress. I decided to destroy the garment. My wife cheated, got pregnant, and didn't know I knew about the affair. Now she wants open marriage. I stumbled onto the patio armed with a club. Those pesky dogs were rummaging through my trash again, knocking over the dumpster and waking me up. It was the 3rd time this week, and I'd had enough. Why couldn't people keep their dogs at home? Though I knew they were just hungry, my annoyance lingered. Quietly unlatching the back gate, I approached the trash bins to confront them. 2 figures stood beside the toppled container. As I swung the gate open, they spotted me, pleading for mercy, explaining they were just hungry kids. Surprised, I brought them into the backyard under the security lights. They were ragged and dirty, dressed in oversized clothes and baseball caps, shivering in the chilly air. Demanding if they had tipped over my trash, one confessed, promising they wouldn't do it again. Not satisfied, I led them inside, directing them to the bathroom and instructing them not to come out until I said so. Gathering some clean clothes and towels, I returned to find them attempting to escape through the window. Surprised to realize they were girls, I urged them into the shower, providing soap and shampoo. After a brief exchange, I left them to clean up and headed to the kitchen. Sorting through the fridge, I prepared plates of cold fried chicken, potato salad, veggies with sauce, pastrami sandwiches, pickles, and chips. Setting the table for their meal would make for a pretty good dinner, I mused. I hoped they'd enjoy the monster cheese, mayo, and mustard on their sandwiches. The bathroom door opened quietly, and a whisper drifted to the kitchen. A minute later, 2 of the most stunning girls I'd ever seen entered, with long dark black hair, olive skin, and the greenest eyes, slightly almond-shaped, high cheekbones, and the cutest little noses. They were a sight to behold. They seemed to be in their teens, maybe 11 or 12. It was amusing to see them in Brianna's clothes. She's tall and they were tiny, with sleeves and trouser legs rolled up. They resembled tramps. Take a seat, I offered. Want cola, juice, milk? They both opted for milk. I'm McKay North, I introduced myself, pouring the milk. Who are you? I'm Maggie, said the taller one. Short for Margaret, this is Stokely. Can we really finish it all? Have more if you want, I said. I'll cook in the morning, but not at 2 a.m. No, that's fine, thanks, Stokely replied. Maggie eyed me suspiciously. What do you want from us? We're not up to anything. I chuckled. Same here. If you're after my virtue, you'll be disappointed. They didn't quite grasp my humor. I'm not interested in little girls, I clarified. They weren't fans of the label, but they started eating voraciously. Slow down, I advised. Chickens, no need to bolt. The chickens are dead, and the potatoes were never fast runners. You'll get a stomachache. They chuckled, eating more moderately. Where do you live? There's an empty house down the block, Maggie explained. We found a mattress and something to cover up with, but we're worried about hopheads moving in once they realize it's vacant. Want a warm bed tonight? I offered. They eyed me skeptically. Not mine, I clarified. I've got 3 spare bedrooms, well, technically mine too, but you get the idea. They chuckled nervously. We've got no money, Stokely admitted. We can't pay. I'm not asking for payment, I reassured. Why are you doing this? She queried. Why be so kind? Mac, call me Mac, I corrected. Everyone does. I'm just a good guy, not trying to be cute, I explained. Ask my mom. This brought smiles. I liked it. I decided to make it a regular thing. I'd want someone to be kind to me if I were in your shoes, I mentioned. They seemed to mull it over. Can I snag some of these chips? Stokely inquired. I passed her the bag and they both reached in while munching on their sandwiches. I finished mine and they seemed eager for more. I poured another glass of milk for each of them and they drank it down. I was amazed as they cleared off their plates and devoured all the vegetables down to the last crumb. They must have been famished. Time for bed, I informed them. You each have your own bathroom. Toothbrushes, combs, and such are in there. There's aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and floss in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just ask. Can we lock the doors? Maggie asked. Sure, but if I need you to, you'll have to unlock them promptly, I explained. They eyed me oddly, a realization dawning in Maggie's vivid green eyes. He's worried we'll swipe something, she explained to her sister. We won't, Mac. It's okay if you don't fully trust us. We're not entirely trusting you either. I chuckled. Fair enough. Mutual distrust it is. Soon enough, you'll find you can trust me. I hardly ever injure pretty girls, I quipped, eliciting another pair of radiant smiles. I think they appreciated the pretty part. They followed me to their rooms and I heard the locks click as I returned to bed. I lay awake for a while, pondering what led these girls to this situation. Why were they rummaging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? I resolved to get some answers in the morning. As I dressed, I heard the floor creaking in the hallway. Opening the door a crack, I spotted them creeping into the living room. Thinking they might be planning to leave, I opened the door wider. Girls, ready for breakfast? I asked. They exchanged glances. Maybe we should just go, Maggie suggested. You're not going to lock us up or anything, are you? You mean make you stay? I clarified. They glanced at each other again, then back at me, nodding. No, I won't force you to do anything, I assured. It's against my principles to compel anyone, but I'd like you to join me for breakfast. They exchanged another look. Will you let us leave after? Stokely asked. If that's what you want, I replied. Actually, I was hoping you'd spend the day with me, but if you have somewhere else to be, that's fine. Yeah, we have to meet our stockbroker, Maggie grinned, her eyes lighting up. What are you making us? Actually, what are you making us? Are you an English teacher or something? Maggie teased. As a matter of fact, yes, I confirmed. I teach English Lit at the university. Cool, Stokely remarked. We don't go to school, too busy. But you're having breakfast now, aren't you? I pointed out. I was thinking waffles with bacon. Do you like that? They did, so we headed in, and they fetched the waffle iron while I prepared the batter. They made the waffles while I fried up 2 lbs of bacon. I'm a bit of a syrup snob. And I'm a coffee snob, Maggie added. I had Maggie take charge of the bacon while I ground the coffee beans and fired up the coffee maker. It all came together quite nicely, and we enjoyed real maple syrup with our waffles. They irked me by asking for coffee creamer. I'm saving some for the barbarians and Brianna who loved the vanilla cake, I quipped. We devoured all the bacon, and they each polished off 3 waffles. Stick with me, girls, and in a week, you'll be as plump as toads, I joked. They both chuckled, and it was the most delightful sound. Then they guzzled down their milk like hungry calves. My pantry definitely needed restocking. So, tell me about Maggie and Stokely, I prompted. What's your story? Why resort to digging through trash for food? We took our coffee into the living room, and they shared a heartbreaking tale. Their father, once a car mechanic, sank into hard drinks and misused post-unemployment, leaving their lives when they were young. Their mother divorced him, and they lost contact. In a battered Detroit economy, job prospects were slim. Their mother drove a cab, but tragedy struck when she picked up a passenger who fatally stabbed her for her meager earnings. Left to die, they ended up in foster care, enduring molestation from the homeowner before fleeing to live on the streets for 3 months. With the surname Steele, they feared the elements, violence, and hunger, struggling to survive day by day. As they recounted their ordeal, I sat in silence, heart heavy with empathy. How many others faced similar fates? It dawned on me that this was a more prevalent struggle than I'd realized. Could I help them? The idea seemed daunting, as a single man taking in 2 young girls might raise eyebrows and bureaucratic hurdles. They interrupted my thoughts. "Mac, are you married?" Stokely inquired. I was, I admitted. My ex thought I lacked ambition. She's a high-flying lawyer, worldly and all. Marriage didn't fit into her picture. What an idiot. Maggie chimed in. I chuckled. She's actually a good person, no cheating or anything. We're still close friends. We both realized we were too young and naive. How old are you? Stokely asked. I'm 28, I replied. And you? I'm 11 and she's 13, Stokely responded. What's on the agenda today? Well, we're going to chat, I started, and I'll introduce you to someone. Opening the garage door, a furry blur dashed in. Spotting our guests, he bounded over, leaping onto the sofa and nuzzling into their laps, his big pink tongue lavishing affection. Meet Granville, I introduced. I affectionately call him Grandma. They erupted into fits of giggles as he showered them with licks. Weighing in at about 130 lbs, he was immovable. I'm certain he outweighed them both. Lie down, Grandma, I commanded, and he reluctantly obeyed, sprawling across their laps. He's massive. Stokely chuckled, running her hand over his head. What kind of dog is he? He looks like a striped tiger. He's a bull mastiff, I explained. The pattern is called brindle, which gives him that color. He looks like he could snap our faces off, Maggie observed. Yeah, he could, but he won't. He's friendly with my pals. He sees you chilling in our house, being friendly, and that's why he adores you. If you were hostile towards me, he'd be on high alert and very defensive. Now that he knows you, he won't tolerate anyone being hostile towards you. If I raise my voice at you, he won't like it. He cares deeply for those he loves. Stokely hopped down and draped herself over him, embracing his neck as he licked her hand. I adore him, she declared. He's so wrinkly and cute. Does he stay in the garage? No, he's an indoor dog, I clarified. Yesterday he got sick, so I put him outside to avoid making a mess in the house. Why was he sick? Stokely inquired. He eats things he shouldn't, like sticks, bugs, and who knows what else. But he seems fine now. Gross, Maggie remarked. He licked my face. Yeah, he's adorable, I admitted. He's my buddy, so I just deal with it. And he'll be your buddy too if you let him. We should take him for a walk, Maggie insisted. I grabbed his leash and Maggie took the lead, but it's more like he leads whoever's holding the leash, so she stayed a few yards ahead of Stokely and me. Getting dragged along. Stokely slipped her little hand into mine. I glanced down at her and she smiled up at me. Man, she was beautiful, I thought. Everything okay? She asked. Absolutely, sweetheart, I assured her. I enjoy holding hands with pretty girls. She blushed faintly but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles, and by the time we returned, Grandma was panting and drooling. Despite the cold, he soldiered on. We sipped more coffee and chatted all day. Finally, I broached the subject of helping them. What can you do? Maggie inquired skeptically. Honestly, Maggie, I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. I mentioned I could speak to Brianna. She's a lawyer of a different kind. Maybe she'll have some ideas. Is this the same woman? Maggie asked. Maggie, she's not that, I corrected. Stop calling her that. Do you trust me? They glanced at each other before nodding. Yeah, I guess, Stokely replied. You've been really nice to us. Well, let's give her a call and see if she can make it, I suggested. You'll like her, just give her a chance. Brianna, busy but agreeable, joined us for dinner. Bree, a tall, stunning redhead, she's gorgeous, but she's never realized it. I described her, and I could see the girls were impressed when she arrived. She greeted me with a passionate kiss and embraced both girls. You've replaced me? She teased the girls. No, Breezy, you're irreplaceable. You know that, I joked back. She seemed genuinely pleased. I assured the girls that we were still friends, which we were, friends with benefits. We still shared great closeness together, sometimes once a week or more, with fervent lovemaking during her week-long stays. She simply didn't have time for a husband, and I doubted she'd ever marry again. We cared for each other, but marriage wasn't in the cards for us. As lovers, we got along great, but as spouses, we argued incessantly. So, who are your new friends? She inquired, smiling at them, leaving them starstruck. I'm Maggie, and she's Stokely, Maggie introduced. Nice to meet you, Bree greeted them. You know this guy's dangerous, right? Not to us, Stokely remarked. I think he could be dangerous to someone he's enemies with. He has a club and a very large dog. Bree nudged Grandma with her boot, and he grunted in protest. Hey, big guy. She knelt down and embraced him. Do you miss me? He rolled his eyes but lacked the energy to lift his head. What's on your mind, Mac? She asked. Why'd you want to talk to me? Not that I mind being invited to dinner. He's a fantastic cook, girls, if you can motivate him. I think he cooked lamb chops. We've never had anything like this, Maggie remarked. Well, then I'm in for a treat. But what's the occasion? She pressed. We had dinner, and I explained. We need your help, Breezy, I informed her. We're clueless about legal matters. The girls are orphans. Well, their father might be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them, and their mother was eliminated. They were in foster care, and some creep started intimidating them. They ran away and are living on the streets. They were rummaging through my trash for food, and I caught them. Now we're trying to figure out a way to keep them off the streets. She studied me for a moment. You want them, don't you? Goodness, Mac, you've always wanted children, and because I didn't give you any, you want them, don't you? I blushed. Yes, I do. I kind of do. What do you think is the best approach, Bree? I don't think it's feasible, she responded. No family court will give you 2 young girls. You're a solitary man. This is a recipe for disaster. They won't approve it. I glanced at the girls, who stared back at me with wide eyes. What's wrong? I inquired. Their gazes met before they broke into tears and rushed to hug me. You really want to keep us with you? Stokely choked out between sobs. I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. Anyone. She struggled to speak through her tears. I held them close. Yes, girls, I did consider it. You need someone to care for you. I need someone too. I thought maybe we could do it together. Their small bodies trembled as they clung to me. I looked helplessly at Bri as tears streaked down her cheeks. She glanced between the girls and me. Darn it, Mac, look at what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you surprise me. What am I going to do with you? There was a peculiar expression on her face, as if she were seeing me in a new light. Let me think about this for a few days. Girls, you're coming with me. It wouldn't work if you stayed here with Mac. It would ruin everything if anyone found out. Mac, we're taking Grandma with us. I can't leave him here, and he'll have to take care of them. She swept out of the house like a whirlwind, carrying Grandma with her, and drove off in her Mercedes. I'll call you, she promised. She called 3 times for about 30 seconds each over the next 2 weeks. I didn't see her or the girls until she phoned me Friday morning, saying she wanted to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a charming Italian restaurant in Pontiac where we often dined. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at the bar with men circling around her. As soon as she spotted me, she left them gaping and came over to me. We walked to our booth. She nudged me and sat beside me, which was unusual as she typically sat across from me, indicating something was different. We placed our orders and she remained silent for a while. You know I love you, right, Mac? She finally began. Yes, I love you too, I replied. I don't mean I love your mom or anything like that. I'm in love with you, Mac. I always have been since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love, she confessed. I trust you completely. I love everything about you except being married to you. You know me, I like my freedom. No commitments, no baggage, nothing tying me down. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them any more than I love you. And I don't have to choose. You're as faithful as Grandma. We understand each other. I'm not physically engaged with anyone but you. I've never felt this way before. You've always understood me. That's why what I'm about to propose will sound incredibly strange. I chuckled. Sounds like I'm in for a surprise. She shot me a, you fool look. Yes, you are. Will you marry me, Mac? Bree asked, her voice soft yet determined. I nearly choked on my wine. Choking on wine isn't ideal. When I regained my composure, I sat there dumbfounded. Stop playing around and give me an answer, she snapped. Absolutely not, I finally managed. Why, Bri? We just make each other miserable. We'll be at each other's throats in a month. What's wrong with what we have now? Nothing, she agreed. This isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet, Mac. I'm head over heels in love with them. You turned my world upside down when you invited me over that night. They're desperate to see you. They cry and beg me every night to come and see you. The problem is, I won't give them up. I've never had as much fun and joy in my life as I have with them. None of us have a stable home life. No judge in their right mind would give them to any of us. But if we were married, they'd grant us custody in a heartbeat. So I need them, and I'll have to take you as part of the deal. If you want them, you'll have to put up with me. Can we make this work, Mac? I doubt it, I told her. You're as troublesome as me. You come home drunk, you're always late for everything except work, and sometimes you don't come home at all or even call. Come on, Bree, we've already been down that road. I know, she sighed. But what if things could be different this time? Her voice softened, pleading. I can't wait to get back home at night now. I always let them know if I'm running late, and ever since they came into my life, I've only been having one glass of wine each night. I never imagined I could feel this way. Marry me, Mac. Give us a chance. Her eyes glistened as she looked at me, vulnerability on full display. I think there's something we need to discuss, I interjected. Go ahead. What's on your mind? Are we just going to talk in circles here? Tell me what's on your mind. Do you want me to start? She asked, her fingers playing with the edge of her napkin. I took a long sip of my drink and motioned for another glass of wine from the waiter. Go ahead, I encouraged her. What drives me crazy about you is your need to control everything, she declared. You want to know every detail of my life, where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. It's like you're paranoid. If you could just let go and allow me to be myself, maybe we'd still be together. But you'll never be able to do that. It's maddening. Surely you know by now that you're the only person I've ever been interested in. You do know that, right, Mac? Yeah, probably, I admitted. It used to get under my skin. I was afraid you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she assured me. I haven't even thought about another person since the day I met you. Sure, I go out to dinners with clients and colleagues. I hit the dance floor with groups, both men and women. I'm having fun. That's just who I am. But since meeting you, no one has ever come close to touching me lovingly, and they never will. Do you believe me? Yes, I do. It's the same for me. I trust you, Bri. I know you'd never do anything to hurt me. You're just so carefree and independent. I'm as in love with you as I was on our wedding day. I think you feel the same about me, and we were comfortable where we were, I acknowledged. Well, I'm not comfortable with that anymore, she stated firmly. There are two girls who need a family. I love them nearly as much as I love you. I love them more than my job. I want to be a part of their lives, and I can see that can only happen if we do it together. So, will you give me a chance, Mac? Will you marry me and try to love me so we can have this family together? I sat in silence, processing her words. Could I really go down this road again? Was it worth the risk of reopening old wounds? I'll never have children of my own. I'm too vain and selfish for that, Bree continued. But we can take these girls. Marry me, Mac, and I'll do everything I can to make you incredibly happy. Okay, I finally acquiesced. Clearly, you've had time to think about this. Give me some time too, okay? She glanced at her watch. You've got 20 minutes, she informed me. Oh, great, so now there's a deadline, I quipped. Yes, they'll be waiting outside in 20 minutes, she confirmed. They should arrive in 10 minutes. They'll walk with Grandma for about 10 minutes, then a car will pick us up to take us to your place. We wrapped up our meal quickly and stepped outside. A limo was waiting, but the girls were still absent. The driver mentioned they were out with the dog, not seeming too pleased about it, perhaps due to potential drool on the upholstery. After a short wait, I spotted them hurrying toward us. Let go, Maggie, Stokely urged as they neared. There's a sketchy guy eyeing us. Grandma's not a fan, he growled. Glancing down the sidewalk, I noticed a young man approaching. He looked about 20, adorned with tattoos and piercings, his attire giving off a wannabe tough guy vibe. What's your deal? He snapped at me. Nothing. We're leaving, I replied. Looks like everything's yours. A fancy jacket, lovely ladies, and a big ride, he remarked. Seems like you're flush with cash. The guy was out of his mind. I towered over him by 8 inches and outweighed him by at least 100 pounds, not to mention lacking his protruding gut. You best be moving along, buddy, I warned. My dog here is not fond of you. Closing in on about 40, he retorted. But I ain't scared of no dog. His hand reached under his jacket to his waistband, revealing a glint of metal. Without hesitation, I delivered a swift kick to his chest, sending him sprawling backward. A weapon tumbled from his waistband to the ground. Startled, Maggie dropped Grandma's leash. As the guy lunged, Grandma shielded his face as Grandma clamped down on his forearm, eliciting a pained yelp and a torn sleeve from his hooded sweatshirt. Up, Granville, I commanded, and he obediently resumed his place beside me. The assailant, now sweating on the ground, gazed up at me as I approached, Grandma at my side. Go ahead, Grandma, I instructed. Grandma lunged forward, his massive jaws closing around the man's neck, freezing him in terror. You're a real piece of work, I spat at him. Got a few screws loose? His head nodded ever so slightly, terror etched on his face. Say it, I demanded. Silence ensued. Bite, Grandma, I urged. A muffled scream escaped the man as blood trickled down his neck, Grandma's powerful jaws sinking into his flesh. Say it, I pressed. I'm a piece of work, he choked out. How much cash you carrying? I interrogated. Handing it over reluctantly, he reached into his pocket, prompting Grandma to tighten his grip. Slowly, I cautioned. When he turned over, he produced a bundle and passed it to me. "Release him, Grandma," I ordered. Reluctantly, he obeyed, and the man hastily backed away. "I'll give you a 20-yard head start," I warned. "After that, he's coming for you. Suggest you make tracks with the speed of a sprinter." The man darted off, but his pants slid down, causing him to stumble. Hastily readjusting, he fled, clutching his trousers with his uninjured hand. I yelled out, "You need a belt." Turning to the girls, I found all three of them frozen in astonishment. Swiftly, I kicked the weapon into the storm drain. "What's wrong?" I asked. Bree was the first to react. "You're one tough cookie, Mac. Note to self, never get on your bad side." The girls rushed over to me, and I embraced them. "Oh my God," murmured Stokely into my chest. "I was scared of that guy, but you handled it like a boss." "Thank you. You did this for us, didn't you?" "Well, no one messes with my girls," I reassured her. "He left you a little something for your college fund," I added, handing her the bundle. She counted it. It totaled $700. He must have robbed a few more unsuspecting folks. Later, she split it with Maggie, and we piled into the car. Glancing back, I hugged Maggie and noticed something. "A van is pulling up," I remarked. "I know," Bree confirmed. "It's got some of our stuff." I arched an eyebrow at her. "Yeah, I'm aware I tend to take a lot for granted," she chuckled. "Girls," Mac addressed them, "we're tying the knot again and keeping you with us." They gasped and squealed. "Really?" Maggie turned to Mac. "She's not so bad after all. You were right. We adore Bree. She's been so good to us. We've got heaps of new clothes, and she got us into this amazing school. We'll make you proud, promise. We won't let you down." "We know you won't, honey," Bree reassured them. "Don't sweat it," she added. I was somewhat stunned. I tried to speak, but the words eluded me. "You okay, Mac?" Stokely inquired. Bree chuckled. "He's not. He goes into full-on panic mode. His perfectly ordered world's turned upside down. His house is always immaculate. Everything's in pristine condition. We'll have our underwear hanging in his shower, mix up his books, leave rings on the coffee table. It'll drive him nuts. I honestly don't know how he'll cope with Granville. We'll have to love him so much that crumbs on the table won't bother him." "Or can we handle that?" I groaned. "I never agreed to any of this," I said. "Bree's like a hurricane, sweeps us off our feet, turns everything topsy-turvy." "Do you love Bree?" Stokely asked me. "Yes, but from across town," I tried to clarify. "But we all need to be together," Maggie chimed in. They all burst into laughter at this, and I couldn't help but join in. It was all so absurd. How did things spiral out of control like this? As usual, Brianna had managed to turn my little mission to help some girls into a full-blown marriage and adoption plan. Small actions can really throw your life off course, I mused. "This is a harebrained scheme," I told Bree as we arrived at my house. There was a flurry of activity as movers carried in heaps of belongings and distributed them to various rooms. To my surprise, stacks of women's clothing kept appearing in Maggie's and Stokely's rooms, one after the other. "Where'd you girls get all this?" I asked Maggie as she hurried past. "Bree took us shopping a few times," she said, vanishing into her room. Bree stuck her head out of my room. "Gosh, Mac, do you ever get rid of anything? You still have stuff from when we got married." "I'm tossing this. I need drawer and closet space." I rushed to rescue my school jacket with letters from the trash heap. "Cut it out, Brianna," I shouted. "These things can't be thrown away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't have it. This is my home, and I'll boot your skinny rear out if you don't quit." She shot me a fierce look. "Skinny rear, huh?" She snickered, grabbing me by the sleeve of my jacket. She pulled me into the bedroom. It looked like a tornado hit. In one swift move, she locked the door, slipped off her dress, and leaned over, placing her hands on the bed. It took my breath away. She wasn't wearing any underwear. The next morning, we made love and I slept until 10, then stumbled into the shower. By the time I shaved and showered, I started feeling somewhat human. Bree was still asleep, her flame-colored hair spilling over her face as she lay on her stomach. God, her backside was incredible. I headed to the living room, where Grandma was snoring, drooling over a stack of my best shirts. I sighed, grabbing a glass of orange juice and a bun. "Come on, Grandma, let's get out of this mess." He lifted his head, rolled his eyes, and got up with a groan. We went out to the backyard, where he did his business, then came over to lie on my legs, basking in the sun. I felt as lazy as a fat lizard, enjoying the warmth of an unusually warm day for this time of year. The door opened, and Stokely stepped out with a glass of milk and a bun. "Hi, Angel," I waved. "Hey, Mac." She closed the door, standing for a moment before making her way to the glider where I was sitting. "Is there enough space for me?" she asked. I shifted over, and she settled onto my lap, resting her feet in the space I made. Curling up with a sigh, she took a bite of the bun, her big green eyes locking onto mine. "Mac," she began, crumbs scattering across our laps. I interrupted. Eat first, then talk. She giggled but stayed silent until her mouth was empty. Mac, she resumed, if you adopt us, will you be our dad and Bri our mom? Would you want that? I asked. Oh yes, she said. Bri would be the coolest mom ever. You might not be cool, but you're dependable. I love you, and I think you'd make the best dad. I was nearly speechless. Well, I mumbled, being dependable is good, even if it's not cool. She chuckled. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, she's like a whirlwind, and you're like a mountain, you know? She really, really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's told us everything about you and her. Do you love her? Yes, dear, but as you said, she's a whirlwind. It's like trying to love a thunderstorm or a forest fire. Mountains don't mind thunderstorms or forest fires, she said, looking at me. Maggie kind of resembles her. I'm more like you. She nestled against my chest. I think if we wanted to, we could just let them whirl around us, and we'd be the calm in the center of their storm, she said, looking at me again. I want you to be our dad, Mac. I never thought we'd find someone like you and Bree, too. She shed a few tears. We were so scared and so alone. Mac, is there space in your life for girls like us? I pulled her closer to me. In my heart, Stokely, there's always been a place for someone like you and Maggie. To love me for years, I never thought I'd have something like this. Bree had never shown any interest in having kids. I think you girls changed her life as much as you changed mine. I've seen the way she looks at you. It's like she woke up one day and realized she loves being a mom. I've never seen anything affect her the way you do. You were right about her, she admitted. She's amazing. Sometimes it's just incredible. She decides to do something, and you're along for the ride. I chuckled. I know, right? She's always been like that. The first time we met, a group of U.S. college students went to an amusement park. She decided I'd be her ride partner. I actually came because I was interested in someone else. She whisked me away, and we never saw the others in our group again. We were 20, and I fell for her that day. She's like a force of nature. That just sweeps in and takes over your life. We had our first fight a month after we got married. What was it about? She asked, curious. You'll find this funny. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I had to rummage through her stuff to find mine. She says I'm obsessed. Maybe she's right, but is it too much to ask her to keep her shoes on her side of the closet? She just exploded. Then I drove her nuts, and she drove me nuts. I've got a plan for what I'm doing tomorrow, and she's totally spontaneous. It's part of who she is, and I love it, but it drives me nuts. She loves how organized I am, but it drives her nuts. These things clash, and we just get on each other's nerves. Stokely giggled. Maggie and I argue about things like this, too. She spends half her life searching for what she's lost. She'll get up and decide on a whim what we're doing. I think we need to adapt a bit, Mac, Stokely added thoughtfully. We need to go with the flow more. They need to understand that we like things in their place. Can we work this out? I don't know, I replied. We never really had a reason to try. Bree and I have a strange relationship. I love her more than ever now, and I think she feels the same, but she's not one to talk about it, she just does. We're closer now than when we were married, and I have affection for her. During our marriage, I didn't do much. I loved her, but we were constantly upset with each other. We sort of just got married without really feeling the need to change. I think we were too immature and selfish, but it somehow worked for us. Perhaps we needed someone like you to make us realize what we were missing. The notion of being a family is both thrilling and frightening. What if we mess it up? We're gambling everything on a leap of faith. I detest uncertainty. I understand, Stokely said, but sometimes you just have to take a leap. You can't expect to gain anything good without the risk of it going wrong. I embraced her, and she purred like a kitten. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I remarked. I'll be 12 next month, she corrected. She finished her bun and we headed back to the house. The other two hadn't risen yet, so we took Grandma for a walk. By the time we returned, the late risers were finally up. Bree has never been a morning person, and it seems Maggie isn't either. They both resembled beautiful, tousled, sleepy cats, stretching and yawning for a good while. After their showers, they transformed into human dynamos. Bree whisked us away to obtain our marriage license, file for adoption, arrange temporary custody, and then go out for dinner. We had seafood, and the girls were thrilled with how tasty it was. They were particularly impressed with the prices. Wow, Mac, you must be raking in the dough, Maggie exclaimed. I chuckled. I'm comfortable, I assured her. I don't mind sharing that I earn around $90,000 a year. I could support all of us if needed. Bree makes 10 times more than me, I added. They stared at her, stunned for a moment. She laughed. It's just money, she said. The point is, we can afford to treat you girls to dinner whenever you want. Mac can cook most things better than restaurants if we can convince him to. You cook? Maggie inquired. Yes, but mostly simple dishes, she replied. Anyone can follow a recipe, but he's a culinary genius. She's really quite skilled, I affirmed. I told them if she could just overcome her habit of being easily distracted, she'd be fantastic. She playfully hit me. Make one mistake and he'll never let you live it down, she teased. During our first year of marriage, we didn't have a dog that would eat burnt food. If you throw it in the trash, the whole house stinks. She used to take it out to the backyard and leave it at the base of a tree. It was as if we were making a burnt offering to the tree. Goodness, they laughed heartily. Bree was in a particularly good mood and nestled up to me. I hugged her tightly, and the girls giggled. We've never dined at a place like this, Maggie remarked. Maggie, Bree addressed her with a serious tone. That's not going to happen if you keep talking like that. You'll kick Mac out of the house within a week. I know you can do better. Try again. Maggie pondered for a moment. We've never dined at a place like this, she stated with a triumphant smile as I nodded in agreement. We know how to speak, Bree interjected. I mean truly speak, she clarified. We just fell into the habit of talking like everyone else on the street. We attended school until my mother passed away. We excelled academically. I believe in you, dear, I reassured her. I'm confident you'll succeed. Though we're from Detroit, we possess sophistication. The girls appeared on the verge of bursting with pride. Bree also gave them etiquette lessons. They mimicked her attire, learned her mannerisms, and emulated her grooming habits. After 6 months, one might have assumed they had been raised and educated in New England amidst high society for their entire lives. They adapted quickly, excelling academically. That evening marked the beginning. Bree was exhilarated upon our return home. She instructed the girls to turn on the TV and leave it on all night. They looked at her with curiosity. Your father and I need some time alone, she winked at them. They erupted into hysterical giggles, blushing beet red. Bree pulled me into the bedroom. We're celebrating, she informed me. What's the occasion? I inquired. It's the beginning of something amazing, she declared. I love you, Mac. Never doubt it. We'll do this every night. I'll remind you of my love, then show you how. We've always been explosive in bed. Tonight, I want to take it to a whole new level, and then we'll maintain this level for the rest of our lives. Do you understand? Show me, I challenged. She unpinned her hair, letting it cascade down, rarely worn loose. It reached the top of her backside, thick and wavy, twirling like a dancer's ribbon as she approached me. Turning her back, she whispered, "Unleash the lightning." I unzipped her blue dress, my knuckles trailing down her spine. She winced, stepping aside and releasing her locks into the air. Dropping her shoulders, the dress fell, briefly grazing her chest and thighs before pooling at her feet. Exiting gracefully, her heels accentuated her calves. She was magnificent. Men orbited around her like moths to a flame, but her smoldering intensity focused solely on me, making me feel special. Her hand slipped behind her back, and her bra fell away, revealing her impressive bosom against her creamy white skin. I think someone's overdressed, she teased. What shall we do about it? I inquired. Pushing me onto the bed, she straddled me, her scent masking the Chanel she wore, subtle and seductive. Undoing my shirt buttons, she freed me from my trousers, leaving my hands restrained. Pushing me back, she undid my belt and pants, sliding them off along with my boots and socks. It was a new level of sensuality. She exuded heat, a creature of allure and mystery. In that moment, I realized how deeply I loved her, willing to sacrifice anything for her without hesitation. Our lovemaking became intense and wild, unlike anything before. Locking eyes with me, she raised her head. Mac, I love you, she confessed. I've always known it. I'm selfish, I admit it. I've never truly given myself to anyone until now. Do you want me, Mac? For the first time in my life, I'm ready to be your partner, your lover, your wife, the mother of our girls. Will you guide me, love me, and be patient with me? I swear you'll never regret it. I'm ready, Mac, if you'll have me. Do you love me as much? I silenced her with a passionate kiss. I love you more than anything, I declared. But you'll need to guide me too. Be patient with me as I am with you. I've always loved you. Together, we can do this. I'll do anything for you, she whispered. For the girls too. I never imagined I could feel this way. They came into my life, and I can't help but love them. I'm scared, Mac, terrified I'll be a bad mother. It's always been my fear, which is why I never entertained the thought of having children. I fear I'll ruin them. I don't know how to be a father either, I chuckled, but I suspect I'll be a great one. It's something you learn by doing. No one knows what they're doing until they do it. I don't know how to be a husband either, at least not a good one. We messed up the first time, Brianna. I know, she whispered. Mostly me. I was so immature. Sure, in many ways I still am, Mac, but I'll try my best to grow. Yes, me too, I said, holding her close. Eventually, we drifted off to sleep. Upon waking, we took a shower together, giggling like school children. After drying off, she slipped into her pajamas. What's the plan? I inquired. If I'm not mistaken, we'll have guests soon, she replied with a smile. You better get dressed too. I'm too lazy to get up now, I groaned, throwing on some boxers and a t-shirt. Within 10 minutes of getting back into bed, there was a knock at the door. Come in, Bree called out. Stokely popped her head in, her face lighting up at the sight of us. She darted across the room to join us, inadvertently leaving the door ajar, allowing our furry friend to saunter in and settle across our legs, purring contentedly. A few minutes later, Maggie joined the fray, and we engaged in an impromptu wrestling match with Grandma. Despite his size, Grandma emerged victorious. We bundled him up in a blanket and escorted him out of the bedroom. Finally free from his presence, we all piled back into bed for some cuddles. About 30 minutes later, hunger pangs struck. So we headed to the diner for breakfast at 2 p.m. Bree announced that we had an appointment but kept the details under wraps. She led us to the municipal court. What's going on? I asked. The most important case of my life, she chuckled, ushering us into one of the courtrooms where the magistrate awaited, asking if we were ready. Ready for what? I wondered aloud. Bree knelt down, producing a box from her purse. Mac, will you marry me again? She asked. This time, I promise it's forever. You know I never stopped loving you or wanting to be your wife. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love. Please, Mac, marry me. In the box were our wedding rings along with hers. Are you sure, Brianna? I inquired. I've never been more sure, she said, turning to the girls for support. He's so stubborn. Yes, please, Mac, they chimed in. Bri really loves you. We want to be a family. We love you too, and we love Bree. How could I say no? It took about 10 minutes, and it was official. Bree treated us to dinner at a new Greek restaurant to celebrate. As I looked around, I saw my future unfolding before me. The most beautiful woman in the world as my wife and 2 lovely daughters, who would grow into remarkable women. Could we make it work? Only time would tell. It took about a month to gain custody of the girls. Bree worked tirelessly to make it happen. When we finally did, they were overjoyed, and we were ecstatic. Bree sold her apartment and we settled into life in my house. I worried that Bree and I might get on each other's nerves, especially at first. About 3 weeks after remarrying, we had a minor spat when Bree went to dinner with a client and forgot to call us. When she got back home, she was met with 6 accusing eyes. What? She asked. Stokely picked up the phone and Bree's eyes filled with understanding. She opened her mouth and burst into tears, gathering us all on the couch. She knelt down in front of us and started sobbing. I'm so sorry, she managed. I just forgot to call. I should have. Please don't be mad at me. I'll try not to do it again. I can't promise, but I'll tell my assistant to remind me. I was so focused on finishing the meeting and getting home. Do you forgive me, Stokely, Maggie, Mac? I'm really sorry. Bree rarely apologized, maybe a dozen times in her life. This marked the start of a completely new dynamic between us. We both made efforts to keep each other happy, and the girls were incredible at helping us. Sometimes it felt like they were the adults and we were the kids. We had a few minor disagreements, but I'd never felt so content and happy. There was a private school on the campus where I taught, and Bree enrolled the girls there. They traveled with me to and from school, and during these trips we bonded. They confided in me about everything, filling my life with their enthusiasm. After classes, we'd head home. They'd do their homework, usually taking a couple of hours. Once they were done, we'd take Grandma for a walk. Dinner started at 5 if we were eating at home. Bri usually got back by 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and on those nights, we'd dine out. When Maggie turned 16, Bree asked what she wanted for her birthday. She said she wanted her driver's license. She studied and practiced for 2 weeks and passed the exams on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bree brought it up in bed. I want to buy her a car, she said. What kind? I asked. A new Camaro convertible, she replied. How much? I inquired. Does it matter? She retorted. No, not really, I replied. I just like to know everything, Bri. I know, she said, kissing me. I think we can get the one I want for around $60,000. I whistled. That's a hefty price tag, but she's an amazing girl. She deserves it. Yes, Brianna smiled. There's been a lot of bad in their lives, Mac. Let's make sure they only have good now. We ordered the car, bright yellow with black stripes and interior, a big V8. Against my judgment, Brianna thought it would hold its value better, and she was probably right. Either way, I knew it would drive Maggie crazy. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage as it was time to leave for school. The girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car. Bree was in the garage and I didn't unlock the doors. "Dad," Stokely said, "let us in." "Not today," I said. "You'll drive Maggie? Mom isn't going to work?" she asked. "No, she's leaving," I replied. "Then how will I get there?" she asked. I pressed the garage door opener. "You're driving," I said, pointing inside. Her eyes widened and Maggie began to cry. I jumped out of the car and Brianna rushed down the driveway. We hugged Maggie together. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. We're giving it to you for your birthday." She tried to speak, but she was too upset for us to understand. She buried her face in my chest, and we held and comforted her until she calmed down enough to talk. Stokely joined us, and finally we got Maggie to speak. "I don't need a car," she choked out. "I love you guys so much, and this is too much. We don't want you to feel like you have to buy us things. Stokely and I already talked about this. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." She broke down again. "Honey, we really do love you," Brianna reassured her. "We love you both, more than anything in the world. Having you girls is a dream come true for both of us. We love buying things for you. We work hard and earn a lot of money so we can buy things for our girls. Making you happy is how we show our love. It might not be a grand gesture, but it's our way." Stokely was in tears now too. I kissed them both on the cheeks. "Let's go," I said. "This is a really cool car. Let's at least go take a look." They wiped their eyes and let me lead them to the garage. I opened the door for Maggie, and Brianna helped Stokely into the passenger seat. Maggie gripped the steering wheel and looked at me. A smile spread across her beautiful face. "It suits you," I told her. "Start her up." The powerful V8 engine roared to life, and they both trembled with excitement. I closed the door and tapped on the window. Maggie lowered it, and I kissed her again. "See you at school," I said. She pulled out onto the street and paused. Bree and I stood nearby, watching. Then her door swung open, and she leapt out, throwing herself into our arms and showering us with kisses. "I love you so much," she repeated. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad in the world." She dashed back to her car, and they drove off. I turned to Brianna, who was crying like a baby for some inexplicable reason. Tears filled my own eyes. "Look at us," I said. "You'd think there were 3 of us or something. That was a wonderful idea, Bree. You're an amazing woman." We hugged each other tightly for a long while. I knew I'd be late for class, but I didn't mind. When Stokely turned 16, we gave her the same car. It wasn't as emotional, but it was still special. We took them to Hawaii and bought them bikes when they graduated from high school. Maggie was already in college. The day Stokely started college, I came home to find Brianna crying on the couch. I sat beside her, hugged her, and we sat in silence for a while. She rested her head on my chest and cried softly. Finally, she looked up at me, tears filling her big blue eyes. "Our kids are all grown up, Mac," she said. "I know," I replied, kissing her. "It's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, looking into my eyes. "Let's have another one, Mac," she said. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby, Mac." Overwhelmed, she started crying again. "I never thought this would happen. I love you so much, and I already miss them terribly. I want to experience it all over again. It was so incredible. I know they're only 60 miles away, but I miss them." "Me too, kitten," I said. "Maybe if we're going to have this baby, we should go practice." She gasped, staring at me. "Really? Do you want that? I mean, to have a baby?" "Of course," I said. "I hope it's a red-haired girl like you. I love you with all my heart, Brianna." I scooped her up and carried her through the empty house to our bedroom to start practicing. We had to shoo Granville out, but I found I rather enjoyed making babies. As I drifted off to sleep, the picture on the nightstand of Maggie and Stokely held my gaze. They didn't look like a Ford, not at all. My wife cheated, shattering our family and leading to heartbreak, revenge, and a new beginning. Last year on Father's Day began like any other. I'd be up early, waiting for my wife and teenage daughters to join me. On Mother's Day, I'd treat my wife to mimosas for breakfast, a fancy cheese plate for lunch, and her favorite steak dinner. As the girls grew older, I handled the pampering solo. On Father's Day, my wife usually cooked me a special breakfast, though last year was different. I waited until she woke to eat, starving by then. When she finally did, she greeted me with a kiss and got to work on a family breakfast. We later enjoyed lunch at a quirky cafe with Doctor Who-themed sandwiches. My wife, a calendar devotee, orchestrates our life with precision, managing holidays and kids' activities with ease. All events, from holidays to birthdays, are marked on our calendar, rarely overlooked, except by me. When my wife noticed my birthday coincided with Father's Day, I wasn't surprised. She joked about double gifts, promising something special. I kissed her cheek, hoping for more than the usual. She usually teased with head employments during foreplay, but on my birthday and Father's Day, they were special treats given without expectation of return. I wasn't clueless, I was excited, thinking I might get a rare treat on my upcoming birthday. But as the weeks passed, things fell off. My wife, usually steady, started acting strange, working late, dressing up more for her job at the bakery, even wearing makeup. Doubts crept in when she went out alone on a Friday, which was unusual for us. We were a tight-knit couple, preferring each other's company. Our marriage felt solid. We weren't big on going out. Our ideal night was lounging at home, so seeing her dolled up that Friday was unexpected. She wore a new skirt, tan stockings, and heels, looking like she'd been to the salon. I whistled, thinking we had plans, but she explained she was going out with coworkers. Shocked, I asked why she hadn't mentioned it earlier. She seemed uneasy but apologized, claiming she had just been asked. I eyed her outfit, questioning how she managed all that in an hour at work. I grew increasingly frustrated, sensing her dishonesty yet unable to confront her. Her infidelity seemed unfathomable. She embodied the typical suburban wife and mother. Our bed life remained vibrant, adding to my confusion. When she brushed off my suspicions, claiming she worked half a day and wanted to look nice, I was left speechless as she hurried out the door. She returned near midnight, her hair hastily tied up, dispelling any notion of an innocent visit. Ignoring me, she headed straight for the shower, leaving me bewildered. Something was amiss in our seemingly perfect life, and I couldn't shake the feeling of impending trouble, especially considering my line of work in retail. On Saturday morning, as I prepared for work, my wife didn't wake to bid me farewell as she usually did. I found it surprising. At the store, I encountered Missy, the morning barista, waiting at the entrance with her striking blue eyes and red hair. She caught my attention despite my contented marriage. Redheads had always intrigued me. "Hey, Bill," she called out as I approached the entrance, still locked as it was half an hour before opening. Missy had mentioned feeling uncomfortable with the night crew. "Good morning, Missy," I greeted, unlocking the doors. "What's up, Bill? You look down," she observed. "Just a lot on my mind today," I admitted. She gave me a curious look but didn't pry. "Give me a sec. I'll get you some of our best coffee," she offered. Forced to smile, I replied, "Sounds good. I'll join you soon." I secured the doors while she hastened to ready the cafe for the busy morning ahead. Knowing how bustling our little cafe became once the store opened, I made my rounds on the floor, checking in on the department crews. While my competent department managers made these checks unnecessary, I valued the chance to greet and chat with my team. Maintaining positive relationships with them mattered to me, and I believe they appreciated the effort. My final stop was at the coffee shop, where Missy had my usual large black coffee ready and waiting. "Here's your cup of Megamart's finest brew," Missy said, handing it over. "Thanks, Missy," I replied, pushing $2 across the counter. "No need for payment today, boss," she insisted. "Can't take any chances, Missy. I cover all my expenses here." "Last thing I need is someone causing trouble with corporate," I explained. She gasped. "Bill, I'd never do that." "Not saying you would, Missy, but I can't risk it even for a $2 coffee. You'd be surprised what I have to deal with, denying someone a day off or cutting overtime." "It's just not worth it," I explained. "All right, boss. Understood," she nodded. I waved farewell and took a sip from my mug, aware that some employees likely receive free coffee occasionally, though it was impossible to track. It wasn't worth the hassle of monitoring video footage just to ensure everyone paid. As the company's leader, I faced risks dealing with employee frustrations over trivial matters like parking regulations, prompting unnecessary HR calls. The day passed quietly, with the highlight being an old lady stealing cat and bird food. It provided the distraction I needed, keeping me occupied without dwelling on my marital issues. Upon returning home, I found my wife and daughters heading out to a concert with other families. While it had been planned and noted on the calendar, I had forgotten. I hoped to speak with Katie later, eager to resolve our recent tensions. Not knowing what had transpired the previous night nagged at me, leaving me with little else to dwell on. Tonight, I seized the chance to snoop around. I checked her email, expecting it to be fruitless, but surprisingly, no one else had sent messages. Since she had a cell phone, I couldn't check her texts or call log. Checking her clothes for clues was also futile, as she'd already done her Saturday laundry. Frustrated, I achieved nothing and went to bed after the movie, feeling just as unsettled. On my birthday and Father's Day, I began my day as usual, toast, coffee, and enjoying the morning on the terrace. It was beautiful, with birds chirping, and I pondered what the day held in store. Around 9 a.m., I returned inside to refill my coffee and found my wife and daughters up and packing lunch. Surprised by their early activity, I questioned their plans. Jill announced a beach trip, catching me off guard. As they departed, I realized they remembered my birthday, unlike how I often had to remind them of important dates. Perplexed by Katie's oversight, I received a call from my mom, hoping it was them coming back, but it wasn't. "Hey Billy, happy birthday and Father's Day," Mom greeted. "Thanks, Mom. Kathy's got some big plans for you guys today," I replied. "Nope. She took the girls to the beach just a bit ago," she informed me. "Really? That's not like her." "I'd have thought she'd whip up a tasty breakfast and make today special for you," I commented. "Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure what's up. Lately, she's been acting strange for weeks now," Mom shared. "Well, don't sweat it. She probably has something special lined up for later. I've got to head to church." "Love you, Billy," Mom assured me. "Love you, Mom." Mom's eternal optimism and her close relationship with Kathy always warmed my heart, especially since Dad passed away a few years ago. I stood there pondering the state of my marriage when the phone rang once more. It was my assistant. "And Bill, there was an incident at the coffee shop this morning." "What happened? Was Missy involved?" "Unfortunately, yes. She was on the stairs when a customer shoved her. She lost her balance and took a fall." "Oh my goodness. Is she all right?" "They've taken her to St. Alex's Hospital for x-rays. It looks like she might have a broken arm or something." "Poor girl. Do you need me to cover her shift?" "No, everything's sorted. I just wanted to give you a heads up for tomorrow. I apologize for reaching out on Father's Day." "Don't worry about it, Ann. Thanks for letting me know." I hoped Missy was all right, but assuming they wouldn't return, I went to IHOP for breakfast. The bustling atmosphere filled with happy families celebrating fathers overwhelmed me, and I left to avoid breaking down. Opting for McDonald's, I enjoyed a satisfying breakfast with coffee and orange juice. Sitting in the park, I reminisced about boating trips with my daughters when they were young. Realizing they had grown distant as they neared college, their outings with their mother became more frequent, perhaps for the best, I acknowledged. There would likely be no dinner together as the day wore on, so I grabbed a Reuben at the Doctor Who-themed cafe. A Facebook post garnered the usual Father's Day wishes, but my mother-in-law's comment about the beach trip surprised me, as my wife had been posting beach photos. Feeling down, I sought solace in a sports bar but soon retreated to a cigar lounge, indulging in a pricey Opus X. Settling in to watch the game, I was invited to join a group playing cards. "I'm Bill," I introduced myself to the older gentleman. "I'm Lance, and this is my brother, Jerry. Pleasure to meet you both." They finished their handshake and included me in their little 5-card game. "Grab yourself a drink, Bill," Lance offered, placing the cooler on the floor. I expressed gratitude and opted for a Miller Lite. "No kids, or did the ex take them with a new guy?" Jerry quipped with a smirk. I frowned and replied, "My wife and the girls are at the beach. Seems like they've lost track of the day." "Tough break," Lance chimed in. "I hardly see my boys, they're both in the service." Jerry nodded, adding, "My daughter's out in California. My grandson, Charlie, just turned 2. I'm heading there next week." "That sounds wonderful," I said. As my daughters hit 17 and 18, I began longing for the days of them being little. They nodded in agreement. Eventually, the conversation circled back to my wife. "Do you think she genuinely forgot, or is she avoiding you?" Jerry asked, echoing my own thoughts. Recounting the recent weeks and Friday's issues, they shook their heads in disbelief. "She's cheating on you," Lance asserted, with Jerry nodding in agreement. "I can't believe it," I muttered, grappling with the revelation. Though deep down, I knew it made sense. "Listen, Bill," Lance began, recounting his own experience. "I've been down this road, the sudden changes in behavior, the late nights out dressed provocatively, the lack of respect. Been there, buddy." Lance shared how he regretted his initial reaction of divorcing his unfaithful wife, highlighting the financial and emotional toll it took. "Bill, trust me," he continued, urging me to consider forgiveness if I truly loved her. "It'll be better for you in the long run. Guys in their 42nds don't often get second chances at love." "Thank you, Lance. You've given me a lot to think about." I might have said it aloud, but deep down I thought he was crazy. Forgiving her for cheating and staying married seemed impossible. I shook both men's hands, bid them farewell, and left. As I scrolled through Facebook on the couch, dinner time approached. Seeing my daughters' and wife's posts filled with pictures of their joyful day saddened me further. Enough of this, I thought. It was time to face reality. My wife had forgotten my birthday and Father's Day. What did it matter? What counted was my certainty that she had cheated, especially after Friday night's strange behavior. Her goal seemed to be rubbing it in my face, and now she had succeeded. Determined to move forward, I prepared for the evening. I decided to treat myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant, even if it meant a long wait. After a shower and donning my sport coat and slacks, I headed out for steak. Sitting at the bar awaiting a table, an older man took the seat beside me. Observing my solitary champagne bottle, he frowned but refrained from comment, opting for a martini. As the bartender filled my glass, he couldn't resist asking if I was celebrating alone or taking someone else's place. I assured him it was just me. He nodded and took a sip, revealing he was awaiting his family, 3 generations strong, despite his daughter breaking her arm earlier. He chuckled, noting the unexpected nature of grown children breaking bones. I nodded in agreement. Looks like I'll be cooking solo for a while. My wife needs to focus on taking care of Missy and Mia and leave me be. Suddenly, a little girl called out, "Grandpa!" and dashed across the crowded bar, showering the man with affectionate hugs and kisses. Then, I heard my name. Missy and her mother approached me. The resemblance between them was striking. "Hey, Missy, how's your arm?" I inquired. "Not bad. The painkillers are doing their job, but it was rough when they said it," she replied. Missy introduced me to her parents, Jack and Mary, and their adorable daughter, Mia. "Where's your wife, Bill?" Mary asked. "I'm not sure. She took the girls to the beach this morning, and I haven't heard from them all day." "On Father's Day? And it's your birthday too?" Mary exclaimed. "That's terrible. What's going on with her?" Not wanting to delve into it, I shrugged. "Forget about her. You're joining us," Mary insisted. I grasped Jack's reference to his red rage. "You don't want them to gang up on you, Bill," he chuckled, a testament to his experience dealing with familial conflicts. "But it's your day, Jack. I don't want to intrude," I replied. "Nonsense," he retorted. "This is our day, Bill. Grandpa, remember?" As their table's buzzer sounded, he tossed a $2 bill and left, insisting I meet him at our table. "Sorry about that, Bill. My parents can be stubborn," Missy apologized. "Don't worry, Missy. Eating alone would be worse," I assured her. Dinner conversation remained light, filled with anecdotes about our daughters. Mia giggled at stories of her mom's childhood antics. Later, my phone rang, but I ignored it, placing it on the table. "Your wife?" Mary inquired. "Yes, it's complicated," I admitted. "Maybe you can find a way to forgive her," Mary suggested, glancing at Jack. I signaled for the check, expressing gratitude for the meal and treating them. As I signed the check, I pondered the advice I'd received. Despite lacking solid evidence of her infidelity, ignoring the persistent ringing of my phone, I couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with people. As I pulled into the garage, my daughters greeted me with kisses and hugs, apologizing for forgetting Father's Day. "Girls, it's okay. I don't expect you to remember my birthday," I reassured them. Suddenly, Jill exclaimed, "Wait, it's your birthday today?" She rushed inside, yelling at my wife. "Daddy, we didn't know. We're so sorry. You must hate us," Jill lamented. "No, sweetheart, I love you more than anything. We decided last night to go to the beach today, and we didn't realize it was your birthday." "It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not upset with you," I comforted her. Though I didn't express my anger toward her mother, it was my issue, not my daughter's. Ignoring the chaos in the kitchen, I changed upstairs and returned to find my wife sobbing alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shook my head and retreated to the deck with a beer and cigar, enjoying the serene evening. My wife interrupted me. "Bill, What's his name?" I interjected, my anger rising. She didn't respond, and I realized I was headed for divorce. What a mistake marrying her had been after nearly 20 years. At this point, I began fearing the worst. How long had she been unfaithful? Was he her first? Did I even know him? Were these girls truly mine? It's astonishing the negative thoughts that invade your mind when you're mistreated. I decided to request a paternity test for the girls as part of the divorce, not only for my peace of mind, but also to embarrass Katie. I spent the night researching divorce laws online before falling asleep on the couch. How I spent my birthday. Waking at 5 a.m., I found Katie peacefully asleep in my bedroom, her undressed body curled around her pillow. Despite my restless night, she looked serene. Sadly, she was no longer mine, but I couldn't help admiring her beauty. After a quick shower, I left without waking her, only to be met by Jill in the hallway. "How bad is it, Dad?" she asked. "As bad as it can get," I sighed. "Can you forgive her? It's just one day's mistake," she pleaded. "Honey, it's more than forgetting my birthday or Father's Day. She cheated on me," I explained. "No, Dad, she wouldn't do that. Something must have pushed her, but I won't accept it. Think about it. She's been acting strange for weeks. Friday night, after getting all dolled up, she went out dressed provocatively." "That wasn't for you," Jill reasoned. She avoided me all weekend. Clearly she felt guilty or resentful toward me and didn't want to be around me at all. When has she ever taken you to the beach without me? It's always a family outing. What if it's not an affair? What if it was just a one-time thing? Can't you forgive her for once? Jill pleaded. I doubt that's the case, honey. But look at her actions this weekend. Has she shown love toward me? I questioned. Daddy, you didn't see her face when Grandma called to ask why she didn't wish Grandpa a happy Father's Day. She dropped the phone and yelled, "No," so loudly. We thought Grandpa was having a heart attack, Jill recounted. He's fine, Dad. Mom sobbed on her knees until we helped her up and sat her on the couch. She kept repeating that she loves you. Honestly, Jenny wanted to call an ambulance for her. We calmed her down and convinced her to call you, Jill continued. I don't know what to say, Jill. She doesn't love me. You can't cheat on your spouse and claim to love them. That's not love, it's selfishness. Love should be selfless. When she was with another man, she abandoned me, I concluded. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't imagine it was just some random guy she met at a bar. There must have been flirting or her accepting his advances, pleasure touches, maybe even kissing and caressing, all leading up to her being with him. It's a betrayal to your spouse to show carnal affection to someone else when you're in love. Please don't divorce her. I have to head to work now. We'll talk more later, she said, walking into Jenny's room. I promised to discuss our conversation with Jenny, no more secrets in our family. I wondered how long we'd remain a family. Despite Kathy's likely busy schedule, I felt calm throughout the day. The only unusual thing was dealing with the paperwork related to Missy's accident. I ensured she'd be compensated for her vacation and helped her fill out the accident report, knowing she wasn't good with her left hand. She signed it, and I felt a pang of concern for her well-being. How's home, she asked. Not good, I replied. She didn't deny the affair when I confronted her. Damn, Bill, she said sympathetically. I'm sorry, I murmured. You probably don't want to hear my story, but I get it. My ex cheated on me when I was pregnant. I kicked him out before our daughter was born. My mom wasn't pleased. She basically called me disposable. Wow, I found it strange when your mom mentioned forgiving my wife last night. She was looking right at your dad, she revealed. Yeah, I noticed. I'm not sure who, but it makes me think one of them was cheating. I'm sorry, she offered. No need. If they're happy deceiving each other, let them. I'd rather not trust liars, I stated firmly. Kathy wasn't home when I returned from work. She was probably with her lover, and I was furious. I drove to her grocery store, spotted her car, and was surprised to find her with a young man. She noticed me and seemed to yell no as I approached, but I left before she could say anything. If she was cheating, he could have her. I drove home, packed my bags, and decided to stay in a hotel until I found an apartment. Jenny and Jill begged me to stay, but I explained that I caught their mom almost cheating with a man in her car after work. Dad, there must be a mistake, Jenny pleaded. I saw what I saw. There's no innocent explanation for her being in the back parking lot with a man in her car, I insisted. Please don't break up our family, Jenny sobbed. Your mom did that, not me. I love you girls. I'll keep in touch every day, I reassured them before leaving them in tears and heading to the garage. As I drove out of the garage, Katie nearly hit me as she sped away. The following week was utter torment. I ignored all of my wife's calls, and she bombarded me with messages every hour, likely taking a week off work to do so. Despite pleas from my family and Kathy's sister, none would confirm her infidelity when I asked. Frustrated, I stopped taking their calls, insisting that my daughters avoid mentioning their mother. Eventually, I met with a lawyer and proposed splitting the house equally, even though I could have claimed a larger share due to my larger contributions. Surprisingly, I learned I didn't have to pay alimony since Kathy could support herself. The downside was lacking concrete proof of her affair, which could weaken my case in court. Nonetheless, I was willing to take my chances. My lawyer geared up for divorce proceedings, and life carried on. There'd be no forced mediation or lengthy legal battles. The split was fair, obvious to any judge. But nothing was smooth sailing. When served the papers, she rallied her family against me again. Supposedly, she only cheated once on that Friday before my birthday, yet her relatives made me out to be the villain for not hearing her out. It was surreal. Even my daughters resisted until I fibbed about a court order for a DNA test. Kathy's letter arrived admitting to a fling with a 21-year-old, which spared me the need to prove infidelity for the divorce. Finally, karma favored me. She resisted the divorce at first, but the judge approved it when he saw the terms I proposed and her admission of infidelity in the letter. I was to be divorced in 60 days. Finding myself isolated for refusing to talk to her, I was labeled immature and a prick. Even my mother and daughters stopped talking to me. It hurt, but I stood by my principles. I called my daughters every day, leaving messages despite their silence. I refused to let them blame me for the lack of communication, making every effort to stay in touch. One change was having coffee with Missy on Sundays. We met at a local coffee shop where she and Mia lived nearby. I confided in her about my struggles while Mia watched cartoons. "Your daughters will come around, Bill," she reassured me. "Living with your wife, who knows what she's put in their heads?" "I hope so. I just miss them terribly." The following week, I returned to the same store at the usual time and was engrossed in reading when I heard a familiar voice say, "Hey, stranger." I smiled and welcomed them to join me again. "Are you stalking me, or is this your usual routine?" she joked. "No, I live nearby and I enjoy having coffee and reading on Sunday mornings. It gets a bit lonely at home," I explained. We chatted about the neighborhood until we parted ways. Meeting every Sunday wasn't planned, but it became a habit. I found her company enjoyable, and little Mia was a delight. On the day the divorce was finalized, I knocked on the front door of my former house. My wife answered, tears evident. Without a word, she invited me in. "Are the girls home?" I inquired. "They're at a school musical. I knew you'd come tonight," she admitted. "So you waited until it was too late to stop it, didn't you?" I smirked. "Yes," she admitted. "I knew you'd try to beg and plead, but I couldn't let that happen. You broke my heart, and there's no forgiveness for that." "It was one mistake, Bill. Why couldn't you forgive me?" she pleaded. "Did you love me when you were with that guy? Did you love me when you ignored me on my birthday?" I countered. "If that's your version of love, then it's beyond repair." "I never wanted this to happen," she sobbed. "And I never wanted a cheating wife," I retorted. "But here we are." She tried to speak, but I interrupted. "Katie, you not only broke my heart, but you turned my own mother and daughters against me. I'll never forgive you for that." "You acted irrationally," she countered. "If you don't make things right with my family, I'll expose your infidelity to every man you date. I don't need anyone else." "Wrong answer." "Then I'll find other ways to hurt and embarrass you," she threatened. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my arm. "It's not my fault," she pleaded. "Oh really, did I cheat on you?" I shot back. "You've normalized cheating to our daughters. They'll think it's okay because you've convinced them it was a one-time mistake. Well, I won't go down because of some idiot who made you feel hot." I freed my hand from hers. "Rotten hell for ending our marriage over a fling," I spat, leaving her in tears, unaffected by her distress. A few weeks later, Missy knocked on my office door. "Got a second, Bill?" "Sure, come on in," I replied, though I frowned, anticipating bad news. "Bill, does the company have rules about dating coworkers?" I disliked this question, hoping to ask her out myself, but it seemed I was too late. "No, we have strict intimidation policies. It protects against potential issues arising from workplace relationships," I explained. "Good, that's what I hoped for," she said, leaving her contact details on my desk, her address and phone number. "Let's have dinner tomorrow night. Mia will join us." I smiled and agreed, feeling grateful for the chance at happiness. "Hey, it's Dad. Hope you and your sister are doing well. Nothing new here except a CO worker asked me out. Anyway, love you and miss you. Call soon. Bye." I knew this message might stir up trouble, but I didn't mind. I needed to move forward, and I was glad Missy had taken the lead. She was not only beautiful but also had a wonderful character. Her daughter was delightful, and I had already met her parents. I felt like things were finally looking up. Just 15 minutes later, Katie texted me, calling me a fool for already dating. I chuckled at her delusion. I had no intention of mourning the end of my marriage to a cheating wife. At 41, I felt young enough to find love again, even considering having more kids. Missy, in her 32nds, might share that desire. It was early to think about such things, but as a single mom, it might be a priority for her. As for me, I hadn't been carnal in months. The next evening after work, I showered, shaved, and dressed casually. Glancing in the mirror, I was satisfied with what I saw. I was in good shape, no extra weight, and my brown hair showed no signs of gray. With a well-paying job and savings, I considered myself a catch, especially for someone like Missy. Yet I realized I had no clue how to navigate the dating scene. Marriage provided comfort and familiarity, from holding hands to intimacy. Dating was uncharted territory. Oh my God, I had to relearn everything about lovemaking. With my ex-wife, I knew exactly what pleased her. Now, I just hope the next woman enjoys the same things, or at least has a good rapport with her body. I worried I rushed back into dating too soon. Arriving at her house with wine, flowers, and a stuffed animal for Mia, I aimed to win her favor. When Missy opened the door, I was taken aback. Her curly red hair cascaded around her shoulders, complemented by just the right amount of makeup. She wore a breezy sundress, showcasing her beautiful legs. Barefoot, her hot pink toenails matched her fingernails. Do I pass the test? She teased. God, yes, I blurted before I could retract my words. She chuckled, accepting the gifts and ushering me in. With Mia engrossed in TV, I knelt beside her, offering the stuffed bear. Her apprehension turned to delight as she eagerly took it, scampering off to show Missy. Watching Mia, I reminisced about Jenny and Jill at her age, realizing how much I missed them. What's wrong? Missy inquired, snapping me from my reverie. Forced smile. Nothing, just thinking about my daughters when they were Mia's age. Is it really that bad? She inquired. They still won't talk to me. Kathy's turned them against me and I can't change their minds, but I'm still trying. I leave them messages every day and I won't stop. I'm so sorry, Bill. I know this is awful for you every day. But I know they listen to my messages. I mentioned our date tonight and Katie texted me, calling me a prick for getting to the point so quickly. Sorry, is that too fast? She bit her lip, looking cute. Maybe, I replied honestly, but I'd be happy to find out with you. She smiled, taking my hand. Dinner is ready. I hope you like pasta with meat sauce. Sounds great. Oh, I have garlic bread too, so be ready for us to make out on the couch later. Mia giggled, and I was surprised by Missy's candidness. She sensed my awkwardness and said, Bill, we're both adults, and I've known you for 3 years. I know what kind of man you are, and it doesn't take much to realize that I really like you. You're going to be a hot commodity soon, and I want to stake my claim early. Hot stuff, I quipped. Yep. You have no idea how much buzz the news of your divorce has caused at the store, honey. Your appearance on the market, so to speak, has caught the attention of many unmarried ladies. You're a handsome man, in good shape, you're smart, stable, and we all know how you feel about fidelity. When I sat down at her table, I felt quite good. So I'm getting in line early, she concluded. I grasped her hand. I like you too, Mia chimed in. Sketty's my favorite. I like Sketty too, the fattier the better, I quipped, eyeing the Parmesan cheese jar. And you must have really pungent cheese, I added jokingly. She giggled, correcting me. It's not stinky cheese, it's Parm. Parm stinky cheese, I teased, pretending to sniff the jar dramatically. Wow, this is really stinky cheese. Missy chuckled, shaking her head as Mia poured a generous amount over the spaghetti. During dinner, we chatted lightly. I inquired about Mia's preschool adventures, and she eagerly shared every detail. It was a delightful exchange. I soon noticed Missy's quiet contentment as she observed us. As she began clearing plates, she joked, she hasn't shared her favorite TV shows yet. After tucking Mia into bed, Missy joined me on the couch. Handing her a glass of wine, she relaxed and remarked, Being a mom is the highlight of my day, but moments like these are precious. I instinctively embraced her, and she nestled closer. It's even busier with two, I admitted. Do you think your girls will come around? She asked. I hope so, I answered, reflecting on their situation. She kissed my cheek and encouraged me not to give up the fight for them. Setting down her glass, Missy leaned back. Bill, I've made it clear that I really like you. I'm too old to play games. I want to continue seeing you, and that includes inviting you into my life carnally. I started to interject, but she raised a finger. I know you want to be a gentleman, but you don't have to be. I'm not looking for casual flings. I want an exclusive relationship. My daughter needs a father figure, and I need a husband. That's what I'm offering. I attempted to speak again, only to be met with resistance once more. Typically, guys bolt after this conversation. I don't see you as that type, but I'm offering you an out. If you're looking to play the field, I'm not your match, but if you're interested in building something lasting, then I'm here. Impressive, I remarked. Was that rehearsed or spontaneous? She frowned, misunderstanding my reaction. Missy, we've had a professional relationship for 3 years. Our recent coffee meetups have been enjoyable. I'm a family man. I've always been. I don't know how to navigate the single scene, and the idea of dating terrifies me. If my wife hadn't strayed, I'd still be happily married. No, I'm not interested in that lifestyle. She smiled, taking my hand. You're charming, intelligent, and your spaghetti is fantastic. We shared a laugh, and she playfully nudged my shoulder. I'd like you to be my boyfriend. Let's build something meaningful together, including with your daughter. That night, we refrained from intimacy. Despite the temptation, I opted to take things slow, respecting both our feelings. A stroke of luck came my way when I received an application for a managerial position, though I never learned the name of the individual who contributed to the demise of my marriage. Fate intervened when he applied for the night manager role. Recognizing him instantly, I orchestrated his hiring, anticipating the opportunity for payback. On his second night, I left a 40-inch TV in his car, identical to mine, knowing it would likely be out of stock by morning. I arrived as his shift ended, walking him to his car while discussing his team. Upon noticing the TV in his back seat, I feigned surprise. "Jeff, did you buy that TV today? We're not open yet." "No, Bill, it's not mine. I have no idea how it got there." "Let's head back to the store," I suggested, to which he reluctantly agreed. Back at the store, his fear was palpable. With no night security due to our night crew, I easily disabled the security system, covering the camera with tape. When he saw the system malfunctioning, he grew frantic, insisting on his innocence as I contacted the police. Despite hoping for harsher consequences, he received a misdemeanor and community service. The corporation, finally acknowledging security gaps, installed parking lot cameras. He never suspected my involvement and unsuccessfully attempted to blame his team. His termination was swift and unsurprising. One chilly Saturday morning, a week after my dinner with Missy, I found her waiting in the car to keep warm. As I parked next to her, she greeted me with a kiss and confirmed our dinner plans for the night. "Absolutely," I replied. "Okay, I have something special I'm cooking for us. You won't want to miss it," she added. Before I could respond, Katie's interruption came from behind me. Missy, visibly irritated, addressed her. "Katie, what do you want?" I asked, growing annoyed. "I've been trying to call you." "Did you block my number?" "Yeah, after your 30 messages about how I'm a prick for continuing to live." "I'm done. What do you want?" "We need to talk about the girls in college," Katie insisted. "They can go wherever they want. I've handled the finances for them. I'd like to be involved, but thanks to you poisoning them against me, they won't talk to me," I replied. Katie suggested the girls feared I wouldn't pay their tuition. Missy interjected with a laugh. "I lost them in the divorce." This retort earned her a glare from Katie, who then blamed me for not forgiving her one slip-up. "You cost me my marriage, my family, my daughters, and my mother. You better never date again." "If I find out, you'll never see a second date," I warned. Missy's rebuttal was sharp. No one wants to date a cheating strumpet unless they're looking for easy lovemaking. I headed toward the store but heard shouting behind me. Glancing back, I saw Missy confronting Katie, pinning her against the car. "Stay away from my man," Missy yelled, jabbing her finger. I intervened, pulling Missy away. "Stop it, Missy. She's not worth it." "You heard me," Katie retorted, storming off. "Please, Katie, just go. It's over between us and it's your fault," I said, leaving her sobbing by the car. Catching up to Missy, I took her hand. "I'm sorry, Bill, I got too territorial," she admitted. "No worries. Parking lot fights are great for the ego," I joked, and we went inside, laughing. Later, my mom called, but the call cut off abruptly. Concerned, I rushed to her house, ignoring Missy's calls. Arriving, I found the ambulance gone. She'd passed away before reaching the hospital. Alone in the ER lobby, I pondered her last words. Then Missy called. "Hey, my mom just passed away." "Oh, Bill, I'm deeply sorry to hear that." "Yes, thank you. I'm worried I won't be much company tonight." "No worries. I'll be there for you. You need me. Please let me come over." "All right, yes." Expressing my reluctance to be alone, I was grateful she agreed to keep me company. "I'm heading home now. I'll meet you there after you finish up, all right? I'll be there soon." After finishing my conversation, I drove to my old house instead of heading home. I felt compelled to speak to my daughters, regardless of their willingness to see me. Arriving, I noticed both of their cars parked in the driveway, feeling a wave of apprehension. Entering through the garage, I was relieved not to find Kathy's car, as I wasn't ready to face her. The downstairs rooms were empty, so I made my way upstairs to the bedrooms. "Daddy!" Jill exclaimed as I entered her room. "What's up?" shouted Jenny, following behind me. "Did you come here to beg? Well, you can leave," Jill retorted. "Grandma had a heart attack and passed away this morning," I interjected. They both gasped. I felt it was important to share this news in person. "Now I feel like I've damned myself," I added. I exited and shut the door, ignoring Jenny's call to wait, and drove off. I headed to the small lake where we once shared joyous moments. Despite the chilly weather, the tranquil waters brought solace. Seated at a picnic bench, tears welled up again. Not just for my mother, but for the estrangement from my daughters. Jenny's anger conveyed all I needed to know. Doubts crept in about my past actions, not with Katie, but with my girls. What had I done to earn their resentment? Katie's betrayal had shattered our family, yet my daughters couldn't see it. Lost in thought, I heard footsteps nearing. Turning, I found Katie and the girls approaching. "How did you find me here?" I turned back to the lake. "Well, you forgot to turn off our Find My Phone app," Kathy replied. "Bill, I'm sorry about your mom," she added. "Yeah," I muttered. "Do you regret her passing away or turning her against me?" She fell silent. "Leave me alone." "I can't deal with your stuff right now," I said. "I'll never forgive you. The last time we spoke, she insisted she wouldn't talk to me until I backed out of the divorce." She didn't even say she loved me before hanging up. "I'm so sorry, Bill," she said before leaving. Then Jenny spoke up. "Dad, we're sorry too. Please forgive us for being rude." They both rushed over to hug me and we cried together. "It's not my fault, girls. Your mother's actions broke us apart," I said. "We're sorry, Dad," Jill said. "We just wanted you to forgive her. She loves you." "It's obvious. Not enough to stay faithful," I replied. "Jill, I'm sorry, girls," I said tearfully. We hugged again while Kathy watched from the car. "Girls, I need you. You'll leave for college soon, and I'll miss you. We're wasting time," I said. "We understand, Daddy," Jenny said. "We won't shut you out anymore." "I wish Grandma had the chance to do the same," Jill added. "Can we come with you, Daddy? We haven't seen your new house yet. Maybe we could grab pizza?" "Sure, let your mom know and let's head out." As I pulled into my driveway, I spotted Missy's car. I had forgotten she was coming. "Looks like you'll meet Missy," I told the girls. "Is she your girlfriend?" they asked simultaneously, making me chuckle. "Yeah, well, we just started dating." "Look at him blushing." "So cute," Jenny teased. They dashed out of the car and bombarded Missy with questions, leaving her bewildered. "Girls, give her a break. Help her inside, and I'll introduce you properly." They kissed my cheek and hurried to the garage while I approached Missy. "Sorry about that," I said. She opened the door with a radiant smile and kissed my cheek. "Your daughters?" she asked. I nodded. "Come on, let's make proper introductions." "I hope I look okay. I must look awful." "You're fine. They'll like you." "Jenny, Jill, meet Missy," I said. They embraced Jenny and cheekily declared, "You're super hot," Jill exclaimed. "Good for you, Daddy," Missy laughed, leaving me too stunned to respond. "Let's do a quick tour of the house, then I need to handle some things for Grandma's services." "Bill, I'll order pizza while you show them around." "Perfect, you read my mind," the girls cheered as Missy smiled. I made the decision to wait until the next morning to inform others about my mom's passing. I'll draft an obituary for Monday's paper and share service details on Facebook tomorrow. Evening after visiting the funeral home. We spent hours sharing stories about my mom and my girls, with a few embarrassing tales about myself thrown in to keep Missy entertained. It wasn't my fault I slipped on the wet pier and fell into the lake. Before we knew it, it was already 10. "Girls, time is slipping away and it's getting late," I remarked. They frowned and asked if they could stay the night. "I don't have beds for the guest rooms yet," I explained. "Tell you what, I'll pick you up in the morning and we'll go out for breakfast, okay? And if you don't mind, we could help sort through Grandma's things too." Jill offered. "Thank you," I replied. "Missy, would you like to join us for a ride or do you need to go home to Mia?" "She's with my parents." Jill's curiosity piqued. "Who's Mia?" "Mia is my 4-year-old daughter," I revealed. Excited, they both squealed, expressing their eagerness to meet her. Missy chuckled at their enthusiasm. "Someday soon, I promise." As we returned to my house, Missy commented, "They're great girls. I'm glad you were able to reconnect with them." I sighed. Me too. I just wish it didn't take my mom's passing to bring us back together. With Missy nestled in my arms, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I awoke to find Missy still snuggled against me under a blanket. Feeling a sense of longing for closeness, I kissed her head and apologized for falling asleep. She moaned, stretching. "It's okay, baby. You've had a very emotional day. Would you like to join me and the girls for breakfast?" "Only if I can bring Mia. My parents have plans this morning." "Of course, my daughters will love her." Needing to fetch Mia, I arranged to meet my daughters at IHOP. As I walked in holding Mia's hand, my girls rushed over. They embraced Mia, twirled her in the air, and showered her with kisses, making her squeal and giggle with joy. "We need to go to the bathroom," the girls announced in unison. "We'll take her," they said, whisking Mia away. "I don't know, Missy. Do you think they'll get along?" I asked, smirking. She playfully clapped me on the shoulder and kissed my cheek. "I hope they remain friends for years to come." Although it was just our first date, she expressed a long-term commitment, which was a bit surprising but reassuring. As we ate, Mia and my daughters chatted incessantly about everything. Mia showed genuine interest in their lives, peppering them with questions. My daughters, accustomed to babysitting, engaged effortlessly with Mia, bonding over shared interests in kids' shows and movies. Surprisingly, they also got along well with Missy, showing no hostility or anger toward her, unlike their initial reaction to my dating. This puzzled me, and I planned to discuss it with them later. After a busy day of phone calls, cleaning my mom's house, and visiting the funeral home, I finally relaxed when the girls returned for dinner. And Missy and Mia went their separate ways. During breakfast, Missy suggested avoiding the emotional strain of Mia's questions while sorting out my mom's house. Daddy, are you in love with Missy? Jenny asked abruptly. We've only seen each other a few times outside of work. It's too early to say it's love. Okay, Dad, Jill said, sounding like I was clueless. You know those cartoons where girls get dreamy-eyed and hearts flutter? That's Missy when she looks at you. Before I could object, they exchanged looks and then declared, we like her. I went from joy to anger. Setting my pizza down, I headed to the sink to cool off. Daddy? Jenny asked. How could you shut me out all this time and now say you like my girlfriend? What did I do to deserve this? Do you know how many times I cried after leaving you messages? You didn't care to hear. Mom made us. What? I exclaimed. Jill explained. It began when Mom said if you felt distant, you could return to her and we'd be a family again. We're truly sorry. Turning to Jenny, I saw her eyes tear up and she rushed to hug me. Dad, we're so sorry. When that didn't work, she said you abandoned us and wouldn't pay for college because we wanted you to stay with her. She claimed your messages during the divorce were just tactics to win favor with the judge. You believed her? Dad, imagine sitting with her every day, hearing her defend one mistake against 20 years of love. We thought you were being unfair. What if it was you? Would you forgive your boyfriend for cheating? No response. Where's the line? I demanded. Unclear. Give me a clear answer. They wept and our hug calmed me. I've missed you both so much, I said. After they professed their love, I reminded them, time to go home, school's tomorrow. Make sure your mom tells them about the wake and funeral. You'll need time off this week. One last embrace, then I watched them drive off, feeling warm inside. Looking at the sky, I whispered, Mom, you didn't have to leave to bring my girls back, but thank you. I'll miss you. Wakes are always hard for me. Being near a deceased body is unsettling. My mom's wake was especially tough. Approaching her casket brought me solace. Seeing her peaceful face, I knew she'd reunite with my late father, who avoided wakes. Mom planned hers meticulously, even choosing the casket. It was a relief knowing she had everything sorted. Chatting with one of her friends, Katie and my daughters arrived. Tearful hugs from the girls greeted me while Katie stepped aside respectfully. After the prayer, Kathy placed something in the casket, then sat alone at the back. I saw it was a photo of Kathy, me, and my mom all holding our babies, beaming. Touched, I took the photo and put it by my mom's hands, tears welling up. During the service, Kathy stayed seated at the back, chatting with everyone. Her bond with family members and their affection for her showed her enduring presence in our lives. The standard rule was for immediate family to sit in the front row, but it didn't feel right. Seeing Katie at the back, tears in her eyes, I knew Mom wouldn't have wanted it that way. Walking over, I invited her to join us. Come here. No need to hide. She hugged me gratefully, whispering a thank you. Back in front, my Uncle John offered her his seat, earning Missy's praise. Holding Missy's hand while my ex-wife was nearby felt surreal. I hoped it wouldn't cause trouble later. As we said goodbye to the last visitors, Kathy thanked me for welcoming her into the family, offering to share the limo ride. Missy's hand on my waist, I feared tension, but Katie's departure eased it. Let's get you home, Missy said, embracing me in the kitchen. Relieved the day was over, I handed Missy a cold beer. She thought things went well with Kathy. Yeah, I'm glad. I half expected her to cause trouble with you. The girls probably helped. We'll be okay after tomorrow. I hope she was right. Maybe I was just paranoid about Katie and Missy. Will you stay over tonight? She squeezed my hand. You couldn't kick me out if you tried. We didn't make love, but her presence brought the best sleep since the divorce. You're keeping a close eye on me. I won't misuse your kindness by starting a fight, Kathy remarked as we waited for the service to begin. I know, I lied. I just feel uneasy about it. She snorted, adding, How do you think I feel, B? I'm an outcast here, a disgrace. I frowned. No one sees you that way, especially not today. I'm sorry, Bill. I wish I could undo it all. I wish, she said, tears welling up before hurrying off to the bathroom. It's tough for all of us, Bill. My mother's friend Jean comforted me, patting my shoulder. Your mom was wonderful, and we'll all miss her. I kissed her cheek, grateful that Kathy had her mom to support her through the tears. After the funeral, we gathered at my mother's favorite Polish restaurant. Kathy looked uneasy as she searched for a seat. Taking her hand, I guided her to the table where Missy and my daughters sat. Kathy will always be family, despite the divorce. No matter where we sit, you're always welcome. A tear rolled down her cheek as she thanked me, and in that moment I felt like I'd finally let go of the pain she caused. Life moved on. The girls Skype with me weekly while they're at college. Missy and I are going strong, and I'm considering popping the question soon. Katie and I don't talk much, but it's always friendly. She's moving on too, dating a nice divorced dad who's a friend of one of the girls. I wish them the best. Some may say I should forgive her one mistake, but I can't. I may be seen as the villain by some, but I'm at peace with myself. My husband caught me cheating, exposed video proofs, and shattered my life in front of family and kids. I thought I'd arrive early at the lawyer's office, but when my lawyer and I got there, Dave and his lawyer were already in the conference room. Seeing him with an attractive woman triggered my usual jealous reaction, making me feel somewhat inferior to him. Deep down, at 48, he was more handsome than at 20, tall and muscular, owning a successful business, and leading the local chamber of commerce. I shuddered at the thought that if today didn't go well, I might never feel his comforting arms again. Dave barely acknowledged me as I followed my lawyer into the room. My face turned pale when the red-haired lawyer reached out to reassure him. I interpreted it as her wanting to quickly finish the meeting to pursue him. I knew from experience that she would enjoy it, as my husband was skilled and knew how to use his charm. Dave smiled at her but remained neutral when he looked at me. Frustrated by Dave's determination not to talk to me, I was forced to attend the meeting. While my lawyer chatted with the red-haired lawyer, I sat down. Dave took a folder from my large purse, opened it, and laid out the finished 2-page script. Seeing Dave smile faintly, I knew he was aware of my thorough preparation. He set up a laptop, plugged in speakers, and put a single sheet of paper next to it. Then, casually, he put his hands on the table and looked at me with a polite but insensitive face. No anger, no hate, no grief. I had prepared for this meeting for 3 days, knowing my script by heart. I used my knowledge of David Brown to appeal to his emotions. We gathered to discuss Mrs. Julianne Brown agreeing to sign a divorce petition if Dave listened to her for at least 1 hour. "If everyone is ready, I suggest the hour begins now," she said, turning the timer knob. It began to tick loudly, emphasizing the silence in the room. I was annoyed that Dave insisted on having lawyers present, instead of a private meeting. I planned to share my feelings for the next 45 minutes before making Dave admit to something justifying my inappropriate behavior. It's awkward with just the two of us, even more humiliating in front of strangers. Well, no point in dwelling on the negatives. I had no choice. Glancing at my unnecessary notes, I crossed my fingers, remembering my friend Sonia's advice. I cleared my throat. I expressed gratitude for Dave's willingness to meet with me today. I acknowledged my error and clarified that it wasn't related to his failure but rather my own self-centeredness. I had spent days reflecting on this, hoping that Dave would appreciate my honesty. I believed he desired to forgive me, and my speech aimed to offer the justification he needed. Contemplating what might happen if the kids were at home, I considered playing the "Dave, you can't break up the family" card, confident it would succeed. Observing his reaction to my speech, I examined his face and was taken aback by his response. In the ensuing silence, Dave's expression remained neutral. He didn't even direct his gaze toward me. Methodically, he raised his pen and marked a check next to the first sentence in his notes. My first words almost completely confused me. I said exactly what he expected, shaking my confidence. In my arrogance, I forgot that not only had I come up with my argument based on 30 years of knowing him, but he had spent those 30 years looking back at me. I'm not ashamed to admit I was shocked. I emphasized the importance of sticking to the script, reiterating that the situation with Dave was a result of my own foolish and self-centered decisions. I conveyed the feelings of being lost without children, feeling aged, unattractive, and worthless. I explained that I met Jason while collaborating on a church committee, describing him as sophisticated and a skilled seducer who knew precisely which button to press and when. He began acting like a friend, listening to my problems after church meetings last year when you were frequently away. But one day, after a church meeting, Jason suggested going to a cafe, and unfortunately, I agreed. It all seemed innocent, and he appeared as a good friend, so I didn't realize he was adept at breaking through a woman's defenses. Well, from coffee shops, we progressed to restaurants where he complained about his wife. I know it's a cliché, but by then I trusted him. The restaurants became increasingly upscale, and the gifts he gave me became more enjoyable. Oh, Dave, you can't imagine how nice it is when a guy 15 years younger than you tries to win you over. But you'd be proud because 4 months ago he asked me to sleep with him, and I declined. I should have refused to meet him after that when his intentions were clear, but by then, I had become somewhat reliant on the effect his compliments and attention had on my ego and confidence. I fell silent and sniffled, wiping my eyes with the finger I had previously rubbed on an onion piece in my pocket. It stung so much that I didn't dare rub my other eye. One teary eye should have been enough. I stopped, started again, faltered, and hesitated. Oh, honey, I'm so ashamed that I didn't break up with him. He took me to a restaurant and bought a $1,300 bottle of Grange, even though he himself doesn't drink wine. Instead of wasting it, I drank almost all of it. I'm pretty sure that's what he wanted. I was too nervous to resist him. When we left the restaurant, he offered to take me home, and I foolishly agreed. Once in the driveway, he leaned over and kissed me, but I was too drunk to stop him. You know how I get after a couple of glasses of wine. Then he started touching my chest. At this point, my logic was completely broken, and I remember just thinking that I should move him out of the driveway so the neighbors wouldn't see us. For the same reason, I opened the garage door and forced him to park inside. I cheated a little by admitting that even in the car I thought Jason might be staying a while, and I certainly didn't want the neighbors to see a strange car in the driveway the next morning. But it was all a calculated risk on my part. I knew enough about men in general to understand that being betrayed was a major blow to a man's ego, and I wanted Dave to ensure that no one else ever found out about it. Well, except for 2 lawyers. Jason got out of the car as the garage door was closing and started kissing me again. As I said, I had already drunk most of the bottle of Grange and was ripe for plucking. He grabbed my key and led me inside. I took him to one of the spare bedrooms, and I will be ashamed of this until the day I die. I let him do whatever he wanted with me. I'm so sorry, Dave. My only saving grace was that I was composed enough with him to get him to put on a safe. After Jason came, I think we both fell asleep, I because I was drunk, and he because he must have been tired after a 4 or 5 month chase. I know for sure I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't drunk and depressed. When I woke up, and I definitely would have kicked him to the curb immediately, instead, you entered the room and turned on the light. I have never been so ashamed in my life. The look of pain on your face just killed me. I realized how much misuse I caused to you and us with one simple mistake. With tears still flowing from one eye, I turned my pleading gaze to my husband. Having spent a lifetime together, I knew that I could read his expression like an open book and be able to judge how my request was going. Not true. His expression remained neutral. In fact, he didn't even look at me. Strange, but he was fiddling with the laptop in front of him. I thought he was writing notes until he clicked the link on his screen. A voice came from the speakers, my voice. Gee. Don't kiss me, Eureka Beer. What about you? Rotten grape breath? What? I had one lousy glass of white. The audio clip stopped, and the room fell into a thunderous silence. I think that's how it was. The roaring sound in my head drowned out everything else. Yes, I felt embarrassed and humiliated when Dave walked in on me that night with Jason before lifting Jason by his hair and beating the crap out of his body. But that was insignificant compared to the fact that I had just been caught in a huge lie. This completely threw me off track. I was so confident that my script would work. My eyes darted around the room. Dave's lawyer smiled slightly. Mine looked slightly embarrassed. Dave just looked at me expectantly with that damn blank expression. Later, I will never understand why I didn't immediately realize what it all meant. What the heck? Dave had an audio recording of my meeting with Jason that night. Being wound up, it never occurred to me to follow the logic of this. Why does he need a voice recorder there if he didn't know in advance that he could record something? What else did we say? The silence stretched, uncomfortably for a long time, and I looked at the cryptic shard of my notes and, looking back, stupidly plunged into the script I'd prepared. I clung to him like a drowning man clings to debris. It was only once. It won't happen again, nothing like that. Please believe me. I just wasn't strong enough to resist him. But I wasn't so out of control that I wouldn't force him to use protection or let him take me on our bed. Or he wanted it, but I would never do that, no matter how drunk I was. We were in Megan's old room, right? Dave just looked at me sadly, and I didn't know what was worse, his sad face or his impassive one. He shook his head and turned to the computer. I felt, rather than heard, him double-click the icon, and I cringed. I just like to watch how you lie in front of me, full of desire. It is very hot, Jason's voice said. Then, once it was finished, another double-click, and Jason's voice came again. When can we have time in bed again, in your clueless husband's bed? It was so cool. This time, Dave clicked and ended the clip, then just looked at me silently, accusatory. What could I even say? Everything I had claimed was debunked, not by Dave, but by my own words. Protection? A one-time drunken mistake? Not getting close with my husband in our own bed? The whole thing crumbled as a lie in just 30 words. I stood, speechless. Though it was awkward, I looked at Dave for any clue. His neutral gaze revealed nothing. I noticed my lawyer checking her watch, making me focus on the ticking timer and realizing the 60 minutes I had to salvage my marriage were slipping away, and I admit, going terribly. I forced myself to suppress panic. Apologies for the lie, Dave, about it being the first time. I just didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. I thought if I could convince you it was a one-time thing, and for the exact reason I stated, you wouldn't be so offended. I stumbled back into silence. Should I now admit I had dated Jason several times a week for over 6 months? The trouble was, I didn't know what Dave knew. He had recorded conversations revealing the night he found us wasn't the first or only night, but what else did he know? Hiding the recorder where I usually met Jason hinted at suspicion of at least one more time. I just didn't know. However, I knew that if I was caught telling one more lie, it would all be over. Well, Juliana, it's time to be vague. Avoid details and stick to the facts. The truth is, Jason did seduce me, and it took a while. He has a thing for older women. It's true that being pursued by a man almost my kid's age gave me an ego boost. I admit it, I was weak. I thought about saying I used the master bed only once, the first time. It would be a lie, but would put me in a better light. But not knowing how long Dave knew about my extramarital activities held me back. I decided to stay silent on this. However, I couldn't remain silent on everything. Realizing I had limited time to rectify the situation, unsure of the best course of action, I turned my attention to my notes. I discarded the initial points after being exposed and focused on words highlighted in capital letters. I conveyed that I never ceased to love and respect Dave, emphasizing that I gave him no less love than I always had. I explained that Jason was an additional dimension that didn't diminish anything from my love for Dave, but rather added an overflowing quality, if I could describe it that way. When I fell silent, Dave redirected his gaze to his laptop screen, furrowed his brow, and appeared momentarily confused. However, he eventually relaxed again, listening to the recording, a continuation of the earlier soundtrack. I understood that Dave's frown indicated he was searching for an icon on the screen before realizing it was one of the open files. It would be better if he didn't grasp it, and he evidently started over, going back to the beginning of the video. I revisited Jason's question about being close in our marital bed like the first time. I cringed, knowing my words once again condemned me. I already told you, never again, not after the last time. That night, Dave stepped out of the shower and inadvertently stepped on a large drop of white, for which I was grateful. Dave accepted my explanation about sneezing, attributing the drop to snot. Sinking lower into my seat, I anticipated the predictable words that would follow. Although I initially felt smug when I uttered them, that feeling dissipated. Distracting Dave by offering to clean his leg and doing it nicely diverted his attention. Commenting, "You have to admit, doll, that your husband sometimes acts like an ignorant idiot," I found myself discussing how Jason and I had successfully evaded detection, such as when he had to hide in the closet when Dave came home early. Insulting? Yes. Dave is clueless. Initially, I found it sweet that he trusted me so much. Now, he's just an ignorant fool. Sometimes I wonder if we could have time in bed right here while he's in the room. The mocking tone made me realize I was rehashing an actual point. With these words and such a tone, I couldn't even convince myself I loved and respected my husband, let alone him. Again, confusion set in. Before this meeting, I convinced myself I loved and respected Dave. But after what I did and said, how is that possible? Steeped in the ticking, tense silence after the final nail in my coffin, Dave turned to look at me. I couldn't look him in the face, so I turned to his lawyer. The contempt on her face made me shut down. Any doubts that Dave was just another client to her vanished. I looked away from her and now looked at my lawyer. She too wasn't quick enough to hide her disdain. Here I am, fighting for my future, surrounded by people who think I'm something they stepped into at the dog park, and one of them should be on my side. My confidence dissipated like dew in the midday sun, and my self-esteem quickly followed suit. Perhaps that's why I revisited my notes and chose to adopt an offensive stance. I conveyed to Dave that over the last 6 months he had been paying me decreasing attention, taking me for granted, traveling for business more frequently, and seemingly distancing himself from me. All of this occurred simultaneously with the children leaving home, leaving me feeling lost. I expressed how he was never there when I needed him, failing to reassure me about my age and attractiveness or provide comfort in times of need. Pausing, I noticed Dave's eyes returning to his screen, and I cringed as his fingers danced, opening the selected file. It became apparent that Jason's words were from just after our second encounter, that fateful night, shortly before Dave reached a breaking point. Jason spoke about our recent lack of a bed life, expressing his desire for more frequent encounters. He mentioned a canceled trip and how I had requested him to limit Dave's diet. Jason explained that he only had the opportunity that night due to an urgent meeting Dave had to attend. He also expressed a wish for Dave to leave town more often. "Well, I want more," retorted an irritated Jason, to which the clip was once again interrupted. Ashamed, I lowered my eyes to the table, avoiding 3 judgmental glances, and recalled my emotional state during the last conversation. The truth was that the novelty of having a lover, even one as young and energetic as Jason, was beginning to wear off. Jason and my actions in betraying my husband had caused me to lose respect for Dave, and it was at least beginning to prick my conscience. Loss of respect, more than anything else, I think, was the reason for my emotional distance from my husband. Even as I prepared for this meeting, fully intending to blame him for pulling away from me, I realized that it was a lie. To allow myself to continue to betray him, I emotionally divorced Dave. Cutting him off in bed was an easy decision, simply because Dave's lovemaking was so different from Jason's impatience that it was impossible to confuse the two. This reinforced to me that what I was doing was very, very wrong. So I began to reject my husband's advances. Well, he pressed for a while, then he stopped. I suddenly realized that it should have been screaming for my attention months ago. Dave suddenly gave up his bed life around the same time he began working longer hours and going away more often. At the time, I thought he was also emotionally distancing himself from me. I closed my eyes, now completely confused about who was distancing himself from who, and then something clicked. Dave must have known for a long time. That's why he knew he had to hide the recorder in Megan's room. Crap. My entire approach to this meeting was to minimize my crime, heal Dave's wounded pride, eat some humble pie, all to get my life back and the future I so desperately wanted. I thought I was calming a recently wounded bull, but if I was right about him knowing at least 2 weeks before he discovered, nay, confronted, me, then he was a lot more cunning than I thought. And I was wasting my time appealing to his emotions. In short, I had no idea what to do. I'm much better when I plan than when I'm spontaneous, hence 2 pages of notes. But I had to do something. Time was running out. The ticking of the clock confirmed this. In desperation, I took my notes and began to look for hope. The pounding in my head made absorbing the words a very slow process. Nothing jumped out. Then I realized that the recordings were a red herring because the game had changed so much. If Dave knew I was leaving for a while, what was his state of mind? He, of course, was offended by my betrayal, but most of all, he was worried about my motivation. Wasn't I satisfied with the quantity and quality of his lovemaking? Did I find him boring and want to explore my kinky side? Did I love Jason? Was I really going to run away with him? I could correct these fears and doubts. I risked looking into those expressionless eyes, wondering if I should risk lying again. If only I could remember what else Jason and I talked about that fateful night. If only I could be sure that this was the only night Dave had recorded. Of course, the sequence had to be suspect. Install recorders, resist. He could not have been sure of this for long, he just wasn't a good actor. I desperately wanted to convince him of the truth. I still loved and respected him. My desperate desire that he would not abandon me proved this. It was far beyond my fear of losing my very comfortable lifestyle. But how do I convince him that I respect him after we've all heard me call him a goofy in front of my lover? What's the point of trying to justify denigrating him to my lover as a sop to my conscience and creating a common bond between Jason and me? Nothing, that I could see. The same applied to love for him. If I had caught him deceiving me, wild horses would not have been able to draw the conclusion out of me that he still loved me. So, convincing him that I loved and respected him would take time. I had won time by convincing him not to insist that I immediately sign the divorce papers. But how long does that damn timer keep ticking to convince him of this? One thing was for sure, my next few sentences were going to score points. Lots of points. Summoning my courage, I directed my gaze across the table at Dave. I conveyed to him that I understood he perceived a loss of my love and respect, reassuring him that it was not the case. I affirmed my love for him and our life together, expressing a sincere desire to spend the remainder of my days solely with him. I acknowledged the gravity of my actions, admitting that Jason was a distraction and that I didn't love him. Furthermore, I assured Dave that running away with Jason was never my intention. I admitted the wrongdoing of my actions, particularly in response to Jason's proposal to limit our closeness. Reflecting on the situation, I confess that I didn't know why I went through with it, especially after convincing myself that I was merely providing Jason with an excess that Dave couldn't handle. I highlighted that Jason lacked the stamina and experience that Dave possessed, and my actions were driven solely by lust and selfishness. Although the physical aspect brought a temporary satisfaction, it was devoid of any genuine emotion. I clarified that I didn't engage in the same perversions with Jason that I had denied Dave throughout the years. Time seemed to slow down, mirroring the pace of those on the verge of passing away. The disintegration of my marriage unfolded in slow motion, with everyone around me moving at a normal speed. To my left, my lawyer expressed her disdain, tossing her pen on the table and turning to me. It was evident that, in this moment, I couldn't even pay someone to be on my side. Dave's lawyer leaned to the side to gain a better view of the laptop screen, revealing that Dave was not playing sound files as I had assumed, but rather video clips. This realization intensified the gravity of the situation. Dave's lawyer grabbed his hand in a show of support, and though he wasn't looking at me, his reaction conveyed a profound hurt, as if the man meant to support him had betrayed him. I witnessed a fleeting expression of devastation on his face, and a single tear rolled down from the eye closest to me. I questioned whether he was truly suffering or if he had steeled himself by fixating on the screen. Amidst the chaos, a few irrelevant facts registered in my mind. The recording was made at least 3 weeks before the collision, meaning Dave had been witnessing my betrayal for some time, enough to discern a pattern. Silence enveloped us as the speakers played, the heat that had once suffused the room now transforming into a sense of dirtiness, sloppiness, and tastelessness. I focused on the table, and my lawyer laid out the divorce papers before me. Helpless, I couldn't counter the vile behavior that Dave had uncovered. With unparalleled ease, he dismantled all my rationalizations, minimizations, and feeble attempts at reconciliation. It was over. Dave, acting as an orchestra conductor, didn't utter a word today. Instead, he indicated the section of the orchestra he wanted to play next, using his skills and talents to execute a silent symphony of separation. No, it wasn't Dave. I ascended the scaffold myself, blindfolded, and with a noose in hand, kicking the lever. Dave simply erected the scaffold and departed as soon as he played the last clip. He knew precisely what I was going to say, leaving me with no chance at redemption. And when I came up with my arguments, based on my close knowledge of him after observing him for 3 decades, I had forgotten that he also looked at me for the same amount of time. Looking back at me with his smart, penetrating eyes, the shame and humiliation were unbearable and finally caused me to run away. Escape was what I needed. Running back. To the house that was still my home, at least until Dave got the eviction notice that was part of the agreement, and escaping to the children, who I hope will never know and will continue to love me unconditionally. The only way to salvation lay through a receipt. With the loss of most of my life, I took the pen, signed the 2 agreements, and threw it away in one fluid motion. I was surprised Dave's business wasn't worth more, but that's what my lawyer's assessment found. And of course, Dave had plenty of time to hide most of it. By that time, the last recording had thankfully ended, and the ticking silence returned. My lawyer took the signed papers, handing me a copy while placing the rest in her briefcase. She left the room, leaving me seated, frozen, torn between the desire to run and the wish to convey a positive message. I longed for an ember of hope, something to convince myself that there might be a chance to rekindle the flame someday, to let Dave know that I still cared about his well-being. The sharp sound of an alarm clock disrupted my thoughts, prompting me to stand up and deliver my positive phrase. The jackal, holding Dave's hand with both hands, urged him not to seek revenge on Jason, expressing her fear of never forgiving herself if he ended up in prison. Dave's response was another damning video, thankfully not featuring my voice but that of another woman, speaking in an almost shrill tone. She mentioned the consequences Jason would face if her brothers got to him first, identifying herself as Mrs. Jason. Initially, I had thought Jason's silence after the beating reflected fear on his part, but now I pondered that being divorced and penniless might be a fitting end for the scammer. The burden on my conscience grew heavier as I considered that he might die because he had been involved with me. As I prepared to leave, I couldn't bring myself to look Dave in the face. Whether he had his expressionless face, or whether he was laughing or crying, it all pained me. A constant reminder of the misuse I had caused this good man. He had lost everything except my house and money, and suffered a tremendous emotional blow, all at my hands. I deserved every bit of his anger. Through tears, I managed to squeeze out a feeble, "Goodbye, dear," as I shuffled toward the door. My pathetic attempt to salvage my old life was discarded, akin to a plague beetle. Perhaps my daughter Megan would visit me while I drowned myself in oblivion, or if she wasn't available, then my son Joel. Just as I began to push the door, voices behind me caught my attention. Another damn recording. An excited young male voice accused, "Cheater!" A very familiar female voice intervened, asking, "Are you sure, Dad?" "I think I'll drink alone today," was Dave's quiet reply.
Before meeting Janet, I led a relatively independent and satisfying life. My late 20s were a time of career progress and increasing stability. I had always imagined settling down with the right person, but I wasn't in a hurry. After several relationships, I started to understand that real companionship wasn't just about compatibility, but about building a purposeful life together. During one of those reflective periods, Janet came into my life. Meeting her changed my priorities almost immediately. She had a magnetic presence that made me feel like we could achieve anything together. Before long, we were planning for the future, marriage, and hopefully starting a family. We both envisioned a life based on stability, mutual understanding, and a commitment to support each other through all challenges. Janet and I got married later than most, with me being 28 and her 31. That was 6 years ago. Before we met, we had each fully enjoyed our youthful freedom, But that left us without much financial security when we finally started our life together. Before the wedding, we discussed our desire to have kids and our plan for Janet to stay home with them until the youngest reached school age. We both felt strongly that having a stay-at-home parent was important for a child's development, provided we could afford it. This gave us time to save money before expanding our family. Janet worked full-time while I took every overtime shift I could, often doubling up on Fridays and working long hours on Saturdays. Our hard work was paying off. We now owned our home outright, and our savings were growing. Recent conversations suggested that kids were likely soon, hopefully before Janet turned 40, as the chances of having our first child would decrease after that. That's why the conversation we had this Thursday night felt so unreal. "Kurt, I want to talk about a trial separation," she said. My mind went blank. "What?" I blurted out in disbelief. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a breakup, you know the feeling. The other person seems to have it all figured out while you're left blindsided and unprepared. That was me at that moment. "Why?" I managed to ask, still trying to process what she was saying. "I just think we need some time apart to rediscover ourselves and appreciate each other again," she explained. "Let's be honest, Kurt. You're not as romantic as you used to be, and you seem to take me for granted. You always say you're too tired to go out. Our closeness has declined, and to be honest, you've gained some weight. Don't you think a break could help us?" I was speechless, struggling to absorb her words and the suddenness of it all. Had I been more composed, I might have noticed the subtle shift from us to me in her words, but at that moment, it completely escaped me. "How about we take a month, Kurt?" she suggested. "Then we can reassess. I'll stay at Wendy's. You can call me whenever, but let's limit our in-person meetings to once a week. Any more than that, and it won't feel like a real separation, will it? Just know, Kurt, that I love you deeply and believe we'll have beautiful children together. I'm confident that after a month, maybe 2 at most, we'll be back to where we were." With that, Janet stood, grabbed 2 suitcases from the hallway, and headed for the door. "Don't I get a say in this, Janet?" I stammered. "My decision is made, Kurt," she said firmly. "Please sit down, Janet," I pleaded. Reluctantly, she sat down again. "Who is he, Janet?" I couldn't help but ask. "Oh, Kurt, I knew you'd jump to that conclusion," she sighed. "I love you, Kurt, and only you. There's no one else, so there's no need to check my phone, follow me, put a GPS tracker in my car, or hire a private investigator. In fact, if you did any of those things, I'd see it as a lack of trust, and we'd have to reconsider our relationship." As she moved to stand up again, I instinctively grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "This isn't fair, Janet. You've had days, maybe weeks, to plan this out and make your speech." "But it's all new to me," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "What move, Kurt?" she asked, finally reflecting some of the confusion I was feeling. "Don't you see that what you've done risks our relationship? Janet, this one-sided decision feels disrespectful. I've always treated you as my equal, and I'd never make such a risky move without discussing it with you first." "What risk, Kurt? I love you and you love me. Where's the damage in a short break? If I miss you before the month is up, I'll come back in an instant." "And what do you mean by contempt?" she asked, her tone now curious and concerned. "I mean, you haven't given me a chance to explain myself," I replied. "For example, we don't go out much because I've been working overtime on Fridays and Saturdays. We agreed to those extra hours to improve our finances. Our closeness has faded, partly because of the natural evolution of a 6-year marriage, and partly because I'm always exhausted. As for my weight, it's because you suggested I take on the supervisor role for extra pay, which isn't as physically demanding. Those are just my initial thoughts in the last 2 minutes. Can't you stay so we can talk this through properly?" "I'm sorry, Kurt. I promised Wendy I'd go out with her tonight," she said softly but firmly. With that, she stood, picked up her bags, and walked toward the door. All I could say was, "Just remember, Janet, you're still married." She paused briefly, but then continued out the door without looking back. That night, I couldn't fall asleep, leaving me exhausted and unprepared for the grueling 16-hour shift the next day. Despite my fatigue, I couldn't change plans. The afternoon shift supervisor had already made arrangements, counting on my promise to cover for him again. In my line of work, letting your guard down was never an option. So there I was on Friday night, in the wrong place at the wrong time, nearly being run over by a 35-ton loader. I barely managed to jump out of the way at the last second, feeling the heat of the exhaust as I touched the ground. Adrenaline kept me going through the rest of the shift, heightened by hunger. Since Thursday, Janet's usual grocery run had been skipped because she was busy packing. The next day, I was back at work by 10 a.m., surviving on sandwiches made from stale bread. The following night, I stopped by a 24-hour corner store to pick up supplies. When I got home after 11:30 p.m., I saw the message light blinking on the phone. It was Janet, telling me she missed me and thanking me for giving her space by not calling. She mentioned she'd be out late again that night and asked me not to call, which left me feeling more resentful. Here I was, working myself to the bone to contribute 3 times as much to our savings, while she seemed to be enjoying herself without a care. It was a bitter feeling, one I hadn't experienced before. Neither of us reached out on Sunday. By Monday, I decided to tell my boss I wouldn't be available for overtime for the time being. When he asked why, I told him about the near accident on Friday night, and he looked surprised and quickly agreed with my decision. By Wednesday, with no contact from Janet, she finally called. It didn't seem like she had much to say. Feeling a bit guilty for ignoring her, I decided to make things right. On Thursday evening after dinner, I headed to Wendy's house with a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates as a peace offering. Wendy, Janet's best friend who had been divorced for over a year, welcomed me in. I never knew the real reason for her divorce, but I had my suspicions. She said Janet was in the shower and invited me to wait on the couch. As I sat, Wendy moved closer to me, making me uncomfortable. I shifted away subtly, but she persisted. Thankfully, Janet appeared just then. I gave her the flowers and chocolates, but our conversation was awkward and lacked the ease we usually shared. After some small talk, Janet asked, "Was there something you wanted, Kurt?" Her question caught me off guard. "No, I just came by to ask my wife out on a date tomorrow night," I said. "I'm sorry, Wendy and I already have plans," Janet replied. "Wait, tomorrow is Friday. You usually work on Friday nights," I pointed out. "Not anymore. I quit," I admitted. "But what about the money?" she asked, clearly concerned. "I've decided to prioritize my marriage and my health," I said, looking her in the eye. "With the extra responsibilities of cooking, cleaning, and working full-time, I've been more exhausted than ever. When you left me that message last Saturday night about going out, I realized I was pushing myself too hard. Last Friday, I was so tired that I almost had a serious accident at work." Janet's expression shifted to shock, and she hugged me. "Please be careful," she whispered. "I'll need you in a few months." The moment was interrupted when Wendy returned to the room, ending the conversation abruptly. "Sorry to rush you, Kurt, but we have a Tupperware party starting soon," Wendy announced. Taking the hint, I left quickly. Some things a man just shouldn't stick around for. Janet walked me to the door, and in desperation, I asked, "Please come home, Janet. I miss you." "Give it 3 more weeks, Kurt. We'll talk then," she said, visibly uncomfortable. Any hope I felt vanished when she added, "Take a break from overtime for a month and rest up. We'll need the extra money, Kurt." I glanced at the flowers and chocolates she'd tossed aside and left without another word. Over the next week, Janet called twice, disappointed that I hadn't reached out. I tried to explain that between working full-time, cooking, and going to the gym, I had little time left, but she didn't seem to get it. The next week, I stopped by on Tuesday night. Again, Janet was in the shower when I arrived. This time, I avoided the couch, recalling the discomfort from my last visit. Wendy, dressed to the nines, stood too close for comfort, making me uneasy. When Janet finally came downstairs, also dressed up, she seemed a bit uncomfortable as she explained, "I should have called first. Had I done so, I would have known they were going out." Feeling embarrassed, I was quickly ushered out, and as the door closed behind me, I thought I heard giggles. I vowed that would be the last time I let myself feel humiliated. Neither of us reached out for the rest of the week. The following Sunday, I was in the backyard lifting weights I had made myself. I could feel my strength returning. Suddenly, I felt arms wrap around me from behind and someone press against my back. It was the first human contact I'd had in over 2 weeks, and I welcomed it, until I heard Wendy's voice whisper in my ear. "Sorry, handsome. I couldn't resist," she murmured. Shocked, I quickly pulled away and turned around, trying to hide my discomfort. I offered her coffee and couldn't help but notice her outfit, which, though typical for her, showcased an ample amount of cleavage. I made sure to sit at the far end of the kitchen table to create some distance, but Wendy dragged her chair right beside mine, so close our legs were touching. We engaged in awkward small talk, a skill I had never mastered. "Are you going to ask how Janet's doing?" Wendy inquired. "No," I responded firmly. "She made it clear that's none of my business." Wendy's smile widened. "She's a little upset, you know. She thought you'd be begging and groveling by now." "Sorry, Wendy, that's not my style," I replied. I asked her out on a date when I first came here, and she turned me down, saying she already had plans. She never bothered to reschedule. I don't know what this separation is about, so I'm just going to wait and see if she comes back or if our marriage is done. I knew everything I said would get back to Janet. Wendy's reaction was predictable. Instead of showing concern, she smiled and placed her hand on my leg. I felt like this was a test, one I was determined to pass since I had no emotional attraction to Wendy. Physically, though, she was tempting, especially since another button on her blouse had somehow come undone. You know, I've always admired you and Janet as a couple, Wendy continued, her tone probing. You must be really secure in your love to let her date other guys. Or are you just pretending not to care? My blood ran cold. We hadn't discussed dating during this separation, but my reminder, don't forget you're married, should have made my stance clear. Without a word, I abruptly left the house and headed to the backyard. Through the kitchen window, I saw Janet lounging on the deck in a bikini, sunbathing. With determination, I marched outside. What's this about you dating, Janet? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. I haven't been dating, Kurt, she answered nonchalantly. We met a couple of guys last Tuesday at a club, danced with them, and mentioned we might be there again. We bumped into them last night, but it wasn't a date. And what happened last night? I pressed. Nothing inappropriate, just dancing, she said. They bought us drinks, but we didn't kiss or do anything like that. We just danced. Since when is it appropriate for a married woman to dance with other men while her husband's not there? I asked. She was silent. If you see them again, it'll definitely be a date, and it's definitely inappropriate. Janet, all of this is hurting me. I still don't know what this separation is about. Can we skip the next 2 weeks and just have you come home? I really miss you. No, Kurt, not yet, she replied firmly. In fact, I think we'll go longer than a month. I haven't gotten my old feelings for you back yet. She seemed oddly uncomfortable, like she didn't truly want to say that. Of all her recent behavior, this was the most confusing. I stared at her for a moment before getting up to leave. You could ask me on another date, you know, she remarked casually. You might get lucky this time. Without pausing or turning back, I replied, or you could ask me out. You know where I live. Starting Monday, Janet called the home phone every night. Our conversations were brief and uncomfortable, and I had the feeling she was just checking to see if I was home. The implication didn't sit well with me. On Friday night, the call forwarding to my mobile worked perfectly. I answered, hearing music in the background. I was already on my way to Wendy's house and saw Janet's car was missing from the driveway. I drove by the nightclub strip nearby and eventually spotted her car parked outside one of the bars. I peered through the window and saw Janet and Wendy sitting alone in a booth. Shortly after, 2 more women joined them. One was Barbara, a friend of Janet's, and the other was unfamiliar. Seeing my chance, I slipped into the bar unnoticed and took a seat in the corner, far from their view. A few minutes later, luck was on my side as the booth next to theirs emptied. I quickly sat down, staying out of sight by keeping my back to them. With some effort, I managed to catch most of the conversation, with Barbara leading it. Conversation? You're crazy, Janet, Barbara said incredulously. From what you've said, your Kurt sounds way more romantic than my husband, said a voice I didn't recognize, likely belonging to the stranger. Yeah, I agree, the stranger continued. I would have been happy to get half of what you described from my ex. Wendy chimed in. Don't you think Janet deserves better? Just look at her. She's gorgeous. Barbara added, I don't know. This sounds like a dangerous game to me. How do you treat him, Janet? Do you spoil him rotten? He must be exhausted from all that overtime. Do you keep him in bed all Sunday, giving him everything he wants? If you were mine, I would, Janet replied softly, but I couldn't make out her words. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, and the next thing I heard was Barbara's voice again. Is that all? And you're still making this guy fight for you? At that moment, someone started the jukebox, giving me the perfect opportunity to slip away to the restroom. When I came back, my booth was taken, so I returned to my corner in the bar. As the crowd grew, I wondered how long it would be until the guys showed up. Over the next hour, I watched several men approach the girls, attempting to make conversation, but all of them left disappointed. Then I noticed the unfamiliar woman walking toward the bar. As she passed my corner, I made a show of moving aside for her. She smiled and ordered 4 drinks. While waiting, she turned to me and asked, So, do you come here often? With a playful grin. Hey, that's my line, I joked. Well, you were too slow, she shot back. We struck up a light conversation until her drinks were ready. I noticed her glancing at my wedding ring finger. The conversation at my table is awful. Do you mind if I use you as an excuse to escape? She asked, flashing a mischievous smile. Do I mind if a beautiful woman talks to me? What do you think? But I should warn you, I'm married, though my marriage is in serious trouble, I admitted. Wow, well, thanks for being honest. I'm just looking for some company, so if that's okay, I'd still like to chat, she responded, her smile softening. Alice returned a couple of minutes later, and we continued talking easily for the next hour and a half. I kept glancing over to ensure no one noticed us. I saw a man had taken the empty seat at the girls' table, buying all the drinks. Alice was great company, and we quickly felt comfortable with each other. Around 11:30, Barbara approached us. You're right, he is cute, Barbara whispered to Alice with a smile. Alice, do you want a ride? Janet's offered to drive us home, Barbara asked. I've got to get going anyway. It was lovely talking to you, Alice, I said, kissing her on the cheek. She blushed as she handed me a business card with a smile before leaving. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Janet calling through the forwarded home phone line. Are you having a party at the house? She asked suspiciously. No, I'm at a bar. I've been chatting with a beautiful girl all evening, I replied, not backing down. What the hell, Kurt? Who said you could do that? She exclaimed. Are you implying that you're the only one who can date? Or are you saying I can't? I shot back. You can't while you're married to me. I expect you to behave appropriately, she said sharply. So, you're saying you didn't call me from a bar earlier? I challenged. Well, yes, she admitted reluctantly. And I suppose those guys from last time didn't show up either, right? I pressed. No, yes, maybe, she stammered. Look, Kurt, I told you I'm not dating, she replied, her tone uncertain. Janet, can we just stop this nonsense and go back to how things were? Come home now. I'll meet you there, I pleaded, softening my voice. There was a pause before she replied. No, Kurt, I'm just not ready. Okay, then just come for the night, I tried again. No, sorry, Kurt, I'll call you later, she said before hanging up. The hours dragged on, and just as I was falling asleep, I heard the garage door open. My heart raced, thinking Janet had come home. I looked out the window and saw her car parked across the street. As the garage door closed, I realized she had only come by to check if I was home before driving off again. Disheartened, I returned to bed, my mind swirling with confusion. The next Saturday afternoon, Wendy dropped by. I confronted her about Janet's behavior, but she denied knowing anything, though unconvincingly. What are you doing, Wendy? I'm married to your best friend, I said, holding her at arm's length as she tried to get close to me. For now, Kurt, Wendy replied with feigned innocence. I just wanted to see if I'd have a chance with you after Janet leaves. Her words sounded ridiculous, but they confirmed my suspicions. Don't you mean if Janet leaves me? I corrected. Of course, Kurt, I really hope things work out for you, she said vaguely, sensing my unease. I walked her to the door, though she seemed reluctant to leave, even offering to prepare a picnic for us. In the end, I had to firmly explain how inappropriate her behavior was before she finally got the hint. Are you and Janet going out tonight? She asked before leaving. Yes, probably, I replied, feeling frustrated. Later, I decided to call Alice. She was happy to hear from me, but said she couldn't meet that night. How about Tuesday instead? She suggested. Just as friends, Alice. I'm still going through a messy situation, but I really enjoyed your company the other night, I reminded her, not wanting to lead her on. I understand, Kurt. I enjoyed our chat too. Let's meet Tuesday, she said warmly. Monday marked the beginning of a new routine with Janet. She started calling me at 6 a.m. every day, again at 6 p.m. when I got home from work, and once more before bed. Though she claimed it was because she missed me, she kept refusing to come home. It was becoming clear she was just checking up on me. On Wednesday, I noticed a message on the home phone answering machine. Though it was just from a marketing company, its significance struck me. It hadn't been diverted to my mobile. When I checked the home phone, I discovered the call forwarding had been disabled. It seemed someone had been by the house. When Tuesday arrived, I met Alice at her apartment and we headed out to a restaurant. She looked stunning as usual. Once we were seated, I decided to ask her a more personal question. So would you like to tell me why your personal life is a bit complicated? I asked, curious. Alice smiled but hesitated before answering. Sure, her name is Diana, she revealed. Diana turned out to be Alice's 3-year-old daughter. The father had left them after deciding that family life wasn't for him. Tonight, Alice's mother was watching Diana. To steer the conversation away from my own problems, I turned the focus back to her experience at the bar last week. You mentioned the conversation at your table was pretty awful. What was that all about? I asked. Alice sighed. Oh, that. It was just terrible conversation and shallow people. There was this woman named Janet. She's currently separated from her husband, but she's hoping that the separation will make him fight for her, be more romantic and all that. The crazy thing is, from what she described, he already seems like a great guy, Alice explained. I frowned. Great, how? He brings her flowers every week, takes her on date nights every month, spoils her. Even though he works late on Saturdays, he still gets up early on Sundays to make her breakfast. He even surprised her with a cruise last year. Honestly, I would have been thrilled with half of that for my ex, Alice said, shaking her head. Some people just don't appreciate what they have. It gets even crazier, she continued. Before they even separated, she was trying to make him jealous. How? I asked, intrigued. She would come home later and later from girls' nights out wearing men's cologne on purpose. One time, she even got a pair of underwear from her friend Wendy, used ones if you can believe it. She left them on the bedroom floor, hoping he'd notice, but he didn't say a word, Alice recounted, both amused and baffled. Her husband sounds pretty clueless, I said, trying to keep the mood light. Or maybe he loved her so much that he ignored those signs, Alice suggested. But when all her tricks failed, she and her friend came up with this trial separation idea, hoping it would make him desperate. Instead, he's not reacting at all. Good for him, I said. Yeah, but when he didn't play along, they tried escalating. She stopped reaching out to him, and when he ignored her, her friend planted the idea that she was dating other guys. Still, he didn't bite. Honestly, I admire him. It's exactly what I'd do if someone treated me like that, Alice said sympathetically. The heartbreaking part is when Barbara asked Janet how much effort she put into the marriage. That's when Janet seemed to realize how one-sided their relationship had been. You'd think that would be the wake-up call she needed to stop all this, but no. They've backed themselves into a corner because this proud guy refuses to follow their script, Alice added. She could just go back to him, lay everything out, and try to fix it, I suggested. Yeah, that's probably what she really wants. But I think her friend is the one keeping her on this path. Wendy gave her some strange, almost carnivory looks last Friday, Alice said, her tone thoughtful. Do you think her friend is trying to drive a wedge between them to go after the husband herself? I asked. You might be onto something. It would fit with what I've seen, but if that's true, it makes her a cold, manipulative person, Alice said, narrowing her eyes. As our meals arrived, the conversation turned to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at me. When the waitress cleared our plates, I felt I had to address it. You know, Alice, everything you've said has convinced me that you're a genuinely good person with strong values, I began. Thank you, she replied with a smile. Do you think I'm a decent person? I asked, bracing myself. Yes, I do. I think I'm a good judge of character, and I have no doubt you're a kind person, Alice answered without hesitation. Taking a deep breath, I realized what I had to do. I need to tell you something, I said, gently holding her hands. Please forgive me, Alice, but I haven't been entirely truthful with you. I've been struggling with a lot of confusion lately, and I've done things I'm not proud of in an effort to sort it out. But I respect you, and that's why I need to be honest and tell you everything. Alice looked at me with concern, waiting for me to continue. My name is Kurt, and I've been married to a woman named Janet for 6 years. About 4 weeks ago, she insisted on a trial separation despite my objections. Tonight, a new friend suggested I should move on from her given the disrespect and pain she's caused me. And I've been leaning that way myself. You were right. I did treat her like a queen. But looking back, I see how little she gave in return. Alice's expression shifted as a range of emotions flickered across her face before settling on horror. She covered her mouth with a clenched fist. Oh my God, did I just call your wife a stupid witch? She gasped. Actually, I was quite offended that you spoke about my wife that way, I replied, trying to keep a straight face. Her expression softened a bit, though the conflict in her eyes lingered. Do you realize your first concern was whether you offended me? That speaks volumes about your character. Of course, I forgive you, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Alice looked relieved but still tense. So is that why you approached me on Friday night? Were you trying to gather information? I hesitated for a moment before nodding. You're right. That question caught me off guard. But can I count on your friendship until this situation gets resolved one way or another? Absolutely, Kurt. But I want to be clear. I don't want to have any part in sabotaging your marriage, she said firmly. Thank you. Your friendship is all I need right now. From my perspective, I thought our marriage was perfectly fine until one Thursday when Janet dropped the trial separation bombshell. She originally planned to leave without explaining anything, but I insisted on some clarity. Even with her explanation, I'm still confused. I didn't have many close friendships because I was so focused on either work or my relationship with Janet. Alice listened carefully before asking, "Do you think there's a chance for reconciliation?" "I'm not sure, Alice. Part of me feels like taking her back after the way she's treated me would be a letdown to myself. And after our conversation, I've realized just how one-sided our marriage has been, especially when it comes to romance. Honestly, it's a bit embarrassing to admit," I confessed. By mutual agreement, we shifted to lighter topics for the rest of the evening and ended up having a good time. Eventually, Alice needed to head home to relieve her mother, who was babysitting Diana. "I had a great time tonight," Alice said with a smile as we stood outside her apartment. "So did I replied, kissing her on the cheek before saying goodbye. The next day, as I walked toward the grocery store, I heard someone call out from a nearby coffee shop. I turned around to see Janet, Wendy, and another woman sitting at a table. My heart sank when I recognized Barbara. She couldn't hide her surprise upon seeing me. "You!" Barbara exclaimed, her eyes widening. The implications hit me quickly. Janet would soon realize I had been spying on her and that there were no men involved in her Friday night outings. Depending on what Barbara said, Janet might even figure out that Alice had shared details with me. Surprisingly, I wasn't as concerned as I expected to be. I made a polite excuse to leave, saying I needed to get home to cook. I watched Janet's face for any signs of guilt, but she didn't seem to notice anything. Later that night, around 9:30 p.m., the phone rang, just as I was about to fall asleep. Janet's voice came through sharply on the other end. "Kurt, didn't I tell you not to spy on me? This shows a lack of trust and respect," she scolded. "From my perspective, Janet, you started this separation without giving me a clear explanation. Wouldn't you try to understand the situation too?" I responded, frustration seeping into my tone. "It's still a violation of our agreement, Kurt." "Your agreement, Janet," I shot back, letting the silence hang in the air, hoping she'd understand the difference. But her response took an unexpected turn. "Kurt, I'm struggling to figure all of this out. This trial separation isn't playing out the way I thought it would. I'm not sure if my feelings for you are what they need to be. I think we should extend it by another month or two to see how things go." She paused, waiting for a reaction. I chose to stay silent. If she was hoping for an outburst, she wasn't going to get one. "Okay, Kurt. I didn't want to bring this up, but I think it's fair. I believe I should be allowed to date other men. Maybe it will help me appreciate you more and reignite my feelings for you," she continued, her voice soft but determined. This time, my silence wasn't deliberate. I was simply stunned. When I finally found my voice, I decided not to speak. Anything I said wouldn't resolve the situation. "Kurt, are you still there?" she pressed. "I think dating would be a serious mistake, Janet," I replied, my voice steady. "Let me be clear. If you date or engage in anything that crosses the boundaries of our marriage, meeting a man repeatedly, dancing, touching, or kissing another man, I will take it as your decision to leave our marriage. Am I clear?" There was silence on the other end before she responded, her voice sharp. "Well, Kurt, I don't think you're in a position to set terms. You don't own me. I think I'm entitled to the romance and companionship I've been missing over the past month." At that moment, I seriously questioned Janet's state of mind. Did she not realize the reason she was missing romance was because she had left the person who provided it? "So, Janet, you're still intent on opening up this marriage, are you?" I asked, struggling to comprehend her logic. "You've never given me a reason for this separation that made any sense. I thought you might be testing me to make me put more effort into our marriage, but I dismissed that idea as too disrespectful." The silence hung between us, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, Kurt. My mind is made up." Her words were full of resignation. The dial tone ended the conversation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it also marked the end of our marriage. Strangely, when I got home on Thursday and Friday nights, I noticed Janet's car parked 100 meters down the street, facing away from my approach. 5 minutes later, I saw her drive off, adding yet another layer of confusion to an already bewildering situation. On Thursday night, Alice called. She graciously forgave me, lifting a weight off my shoulders. She then asked for an update, assuring me her inquiry was purely out of friendship. I recounted my recent conversations with Janet and my analysis of her likely motives. "So, what's your plan now, Kurt?" Just going to sit back and wait for her to deal the final blow to your marriage? I guess. Do you want me to keep an eye on her this weekend, Kurt? No, don't get involved, Alice. How about we figure out where they are and you take me to the same place? No, I won't stoop to her level, but I would like to see you this weekend. We quickly arranged a picnic for Sunday afternoon. After a little back and forth, Alice didn't press me on why I wasn't free on Friday or Saturday. She understood. We must have talked for 2 hours that Friday, and it didn't take long to figure out where Janet and Wendy were. The fact that they were at the same bar made me think of two possibilities. Either Janet was confident I wouldn't dare spy on her again, or more likely, she expected me to do just that. This time, I watched everything unfold from the windows, feeling a bit ashamed of myself. Surprisingly, Janet behaved well that night. It was just her, Wendy, and Barbara chatting. Until around 10 p.m., Wendy accepted a few dance offers, but Janet and Barbara turned them down. Eventually, two persistent guys approached Janet and Wendy. Barbara left shortly after, leaving the trio at the table. Throughout the evening, Janet and Wendy frequently scanned the darker corners of the bar. I was pleasantly surprised when they both left together at 11:30. I followed their taxi home and stayed until the lights went out. Saturday was different. Again, they were at the same bar, and the same two guys were waiting. This time, they didn't waste time making a move. My marriage ended when Wendy went off to dance with one of them, leaving the other guy to pursue Janet. From my vantage point, I saw his hand on her leg. I gave her 5 minutes to handle the situation, during which she scanned the bar at least 6 times. I walked into the bar. When Janet saw me approaching, she at least had the decency to push the guy's hand away. Her expression, however, was smug as she opened with, "Kurt, I warned you not to spy on me again." Her unfortunate companion, sensing the tension, stood up, unsure whether to confront me or flee. Ignoring social norms, I stepped in close, towering over him with my 6-foot frame. In a low growl, I uttered the shortest sentence possible. "Go!" He bolted. Keeping my eyes on Janet's face, I sat in his vacated seat and pulled a roll of papers from my bosom pocket. "These are divorce papers, mutually agreed upon. I've already filled them out. All you need to do is sign. I've also included an agreement to split everything 50-50. I'll keep the house since you've already moved out." As I spoke, I watched her smug expression turn to one of horror. I didn't stay to see the rest of her reaction. Avoiding eye contact, I left quickly, hoping to hide the emotions building inside me. Curiosity got the better of me, and I returned to watch through the window. Janet was crying openly. Wendy returned shortly after, looking puzzled. As soon as she saw the papers on the table, a grin spread across her face. Wendy did most of the talking over the next hour. 15 minutes in, Janet's tears had stopped, and by the end of their conversation, she looked remarkably at ease. Wendy's influence was clear. She had somehow convinced Janet that their plan was still on track. That night, sleep eluded me once again as I prepared for the inevitable final confrontation. More heartache was on the horizon, and despite everything, I couldn't shake my feelings for Janet. Expecting Wendy to show up the next day, I pretended not to be home when she arrived. Ignoring her calls, I waited in silence. Strangely, Janet didn't call. By 1:30 p.m., I found myself at Alice's door with a bunch of red roses. As soon as she saw the flowers, Alice wrapped me in a warm hug, offering comfort amidst the chaos. "I was going to ask how the past few days went, but I think I can tell," Alice remarked perceptively, glancing at the roses in my hand. She understood the gesture. It was clear that roses weren't something friends exchanged in the midst of unresolved issues. She led me inside, where I met her mother. "Kurt, this is my mom, Batty. Mom, meet my boyfriend, Kurt." Alice introduced us, her words catching me by surprise in the best way. I was momentarily speechless, wondering how much Alice had shared with her mom about us. Thankfully, Batty addressed the question hanging in the air. "So, is it over?" she asked. "All but the shouting, as my dad used to say," I replied, updating them on the latest development. I explained that Janet hadn't fully grasped the seriousness of the situation yet, and that I still had to prove my resolve. Through my words, they could sense the pain I was in, and Batty offered a comforting hug. Just then, a little angel entered the room. Diana had woken from her nap. I was introduced to her as well. Diana seemed disappointed when Alice mentioned we were going out, despite Batty's efforts to cheer her up. Noticing Diana's reaction, I leaned toward Alice. "Can she come with us?" I whispered. "Are you sure?" she asked, surprised by my offer. "You're a package deal, and I accept that," I assured her. "That would be wonderful. It's hard to be away from her all week while I'm at work, so I try to spend my weekends with her." Alice explained, her eyes filled with gratitude. Diana's face lit up with joy when she heard she could join us for the afternoon. We had a wonderful time by the river, soaking in the sunshine and enjoying each other's company. Alice joked about feeling a bit left out, but the grin on her face made it clear she was only teasing. After dropping both of them home, I was greeted by Batty, who had prepared dinner. I said goodbye to Alice with a gentle kiss on the cheek before heading home. As I arrived home, I sensed Janet nearby, lurking in her usual spot. Before I could open the front door, she pulled into the driveway. Stepping out of her car, she handed me the divorce papers I had given her on Saturday. Signed and witnessed. "Here you go, Kurt. Signed and witnessed. Good night," she said, catching me off guard. Without another word, she walked back to her car. But as she was leaving, she called out boldly, "Now that I've called your bluff, maybe you can ask me out on a date this week. I'm free on Wednesday," before driving off. In that moment, I realized Janet was operating on a completely different wavelength. If the end was near, it seemed like it was going to be a chaotic one. And the chaos began on Monday evening. Wendy was waiting for me in the driveway when I got home from work. Before I could react, she kissed me. I pushed her away firmly and exclaimed, "Wendy, let me make this clear once and for all. I'm not the least bit interested in you." Before she could respond, Janet's car roared into the driveway, tires screeching. Wendy tried to run, but Janet blocked her escape. As soon as Janet stopped the car, she jumped out, flinging the door open and knocking Wendy to the ground. When Wendy tried to get up, Janet slapped her hard across the head, sending her back down. Wendy stayed down this time, knowing better than to challenge Janet's fury. But Janet, having realized she'd been deceived, unleashed her full rage, kicking Wendy repeatedly. I knew better than to interfere. Janet's anger was wild, like a cornered animal. When Janet showed signs of exhaustion but still seethed with anger, I risked stepping in to restrain her. At that moment, a police car happened to drive by. Both Janet and I were cuffed, and an ambulance was called for Wendy's injuries. Janet was interviewed first, and I could hear her shouts echoing from the holding cells. Eventually, they moved her to a cell across from mine. When it was my turn to speak, I told the police the full story, trying to explain that Janet's actions had been provoked. It felt like the least I could do. They released me with an apology at 11 p.m. On Monday, I went to work as usual, grateful for the peace that being underground provided, where cell signals couldn't reach me. On the way home, I updated Alice over the phone. She invited me over for dinner and relayed a sweet request from Diana. "Can that nice Kurt read me a bedtime story tonight?" Running later than usual, I stopped by Wendy's parents' house. I explained what I knew about Wendy's manipulation of Janet. Surprisingly, her parents weren't shocked. I urged them to persuade Wendy not to press charges against Janet, and they promised to help. When I arrived home, I saw Janet's car in the garage. Upstairs, her suitcases were unpacked, and I could hear the shower running. Anticipating what was coming, I waited downstairs and called Alice to cancel our dinner plans. We speculated about Janet's intentions, but neither of us saw what was coming next. Janet strode down the stairs confidently, a wave of unease hitting me. "What's for dinner, Kurt?" I hesitated before answering, and she stepped directly in front of me. "I've decided to forgive you, Kurt," she announced. "We've both been foolish, but let's move on. I'm back. If you haven't made dinner plans, let's go out." I struggled to find words, my disbelief evident. "Forgive me. Janet, what exactly have I done that I need forgiving for?" For the first time, Janet's confidence wavered. "For the pain you caused with that ridiculous divorce stunt, Kurt. It was a low blow, but I knew you were bluffing." "What makes you so sure I was bluffing, Janet?" "Because Wendy said—" Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. She sank onto the coffee table, the color draining from her face. For several long minutes, I watched as a new understanding took hold. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I gave you up, didn't I? You weren't bluffing about the divorce. I thought you were, so I signed it." I shook my head sadly. "For the record, Janet, you didn't give me up, you threw me away. I've always done everything I could for you. And what did I get in return? You left me alone, lost and confused. I warned you it was a gamble. After all the love and effort I put in, I expected at least respect and loyalty. But did I get that? No, I got disrespected and abandoned. Did you ever think about the imbalance in our marriage? The one-sided effort I've seen over the last 5 weeks?" "No," Janet whispered. "You let someone manipulate you into thinking you could get more." "Well, Wendy's out of the picture now," she added. "This isn't about Wendy. I know she tried to drive us apart, but I never considered her more than a manipulator," I replied. "So we're okay now, right, Kurt?" Janet asked, hope in her voice. This was the moment of truth. No, Janet, we're not okay. The divorce papers prove it. I can't forget the disrespect, the threats. And when you threw me away, someone else picked me up. Janet stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. For the first time in all these weeks, the realization seemed to sink in. Her gamble had cost her everything. "You can't mean that, Kurt," she whispered, shaking her head slowly. "You're just saying this to hurt me. You wouldn't—" "I don't want to hurt you, Janet," I interrupted softly. "I never wanted any of this. But I've come to understand that you and we've been living in two different worlds. I stayed, waiting, hoping things would go back to the way they were. But you pushed me away time and time again." She sat down, her hands trembling as she placed them in her lap. "But I signed those papers because I thought you were bluffing. I thought you were testing me, just like I was testing you." I sighed, the weight of all the emotions I had been carrying finally feeling lighter. "This was never a test, Janet. Not for me. I wanted to fix things, to understand why you felt the way you did. But instead, you gave up on us, on everything we built." She lowered her head, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with years ago, the woman who had once been my partner, my friend, my confidant. But that person was buried now, hidden beneath layers of pride, manipulation, and regret. "I never stopped loving you, Kurt," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even now, I still love you." I closed my eyes briefly, struggling to keep my composure. "Love isn't enough, Janet. Not anymore. Love without respect, without trust, it's hollow. You've made me feel like I was the only one fighting for this marriage, and I've come to realize that's not the kind of relationship I want." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw true vulnerability in her. "I didn't think it would end like this," she whispered. I thought I could push you, that you would fight harder for me, for us. I never expected you to let go." I knelt down in front of her, my heart heavy but resolute. "I didn't let go, Janet. You pushed me away. I stayed as long as I could, but eventually, I had to start thinking about myself, about what I need and deserve in a relationship. And I deserve more than what you've given me these past few months." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her breath shaky. "Is she the reason? The woman you met?" I hesitated, then nodded. "She's not the reason our marriage ended, Janet. That was between you and me. But she helped me see that I was worth more than being someone's second choice. She helped me realize that I deserve someone who respects me, who doesn't treat love like a game." Janet stood abruptly, her face hardening as she tried to suppress her emotions. "So that's it then? You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through, all the plans we made, you'll just throw it all away for some woman you barely know?" I shook my head, feeling a pang of sorrow for how far we had drifted from each other. "I'm not throwing anything away, Janet. I'm moving forward. And honestly, I think you need to do the same. This version of us, it isn't healthy. It's been toxic for both of us." She paced around the room, running her hands through her hair in frustration. "I thought we had more time," she muttered. "I thought we could figure it out. We had plenty of time, Janet, but you chose to test me instead of talking to me. You chose to push me away instead of pulling me closer. And now it's too late." The words seemed to hang in the air, final and irreversible. Janet stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she said, her voice small. "I never wanted to lose you." I stood, feeling the need to bring this conversation to a close. Maybe one day you'll understand why it ended this way. But for now, we need to accept that it's over. We've hurt each other too much to go back. She looked at me one last time, her eyes searching mine for something. Perhaps a sign that there was still hope. But there was none. Not anymore. As I turned to leave, Janet called out to me, her voice trembling. "What happens now, Kurt? What do I do?" I paused at the door, my hand resting on the knob. "You figure out who you are without me," I said quietly, "and I'll do the same." With that, I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. Outside, the evening air was cool against my skin, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos that had consumed my life for so long was finally over, and while the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was free. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Alice. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Diana can't wait to hear her bedtime story." A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. I texted back a quick reply and started the engine, heading towards something new, something real, something built on mutual respect and understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Whatever the future held, I was ready for it.